takes future-focused vision to find ideas that become solutions to the world's most pressing concerns. Innovation and creativity are the sparks that ignite to transform lives and society, and these need space to grow.
We are home to these creative and innovative sparks. Our work goes beyond the disciplines, across our 9 faculties, 7 campuses, and being one of Africa's top business schools. As an African global university, we stand proudly among the world's top universities. We remain at the forefront of universal discoveries and provide authentically African solutions to the world's greatest challenges and opportunities. We are pioneers in our fields, from the humanities to cutting-edge technologies, continually seeking ways to improve the world around us. Our hybrid learning systems provide quality education that enables graduates to become adaptable game changers. We have molded nearly 500,000 alumni who have made their mark locally and internationally, and we continue to inspire and equip our students to uphold our firmly rooted culture of excellence. At the heart of what we do is our people. They are creative, critical thinkers who can shape society for the better, because that is how we teach, learn, innovate, impact, and live. We are the University of Pretoria.
Good morning, colleagues, and after that amazing video, I want to welcome you to day 2 of our Senate 2024 conference. And before I even start, I really want to acknowledge the amazing work that was done by all the speakers yesterday. It was really quite enriching and thought-provoking, and we're still even having our post meetings and chats around day 1. So before I even start, can we please give a round of applause to day 1 yesterday? And so, colleagues, this morning we'll continue to really unpack our theme of teaching with impact and advancing curricular community engagement for societal transformation. And my name is Professor Flavia Senkbuge. I'm the acting DVC for Student Life and also Deputy Dean, Stakeholder Relations at the Faculty of Health Sciences. And I will be moderating this first session. And as Prof. Ferris said yesterday, the reality of our teaching and learning is that we have to step out of the traditional classroom, and also just to make sure that within the communities where we work and where we find ourselves, that we're really creating an impact. And I think what we're really unpacking today is what will that impact look like. And so today we have 3 sessions. The first session, which will have 3 speakers, and the second session will follow the same format as yesterday with a panel discussion, again continuing our engagement on reimagining CCE. And the last session will break up into groups, and we will have again a discussion that will be led by our facilitators. And then lastly, we will have a report back from the rapporteurs. And then after that, Prof. Mosia will close us out. We aim to finish today by 12:30, and then after that have a quick bite of lunch from 12:30 to 1. And so if you have any engagement, 1 o'clock is a good time. And so please allow me then to introduce our first speaker, and it's an honor to have you join us, Professor Robert Kibugi, who is an Associate Professor of Law at the University of Nairobi. And Professor Kibugi today will be talking about understanding and engaging with communities as equal partners, teaching, learning, and research. And Prof. Kibugi's substantive biography is in the folder that was given to you. And if you can't find it, also you have it on your program that is electronic. But I do want to highlight a few things from Professor Kibugi's bio, that he is an environmental and land lawyer, and he's been an advocate of the High Court in Kenya since 2006. Professor Kibugi also has experience in teaching, research, and also advising governments, not only just the Kenyan government, but also a number of African governments. And most recently, he led the technical team that developed and drafted the 2023 and 2027 National Climate Change Action Plan, abbreviated NCCP, and that was launched during the African Climate Summit, which was last year in September. I do want to also, as I call you up, Professor Kibugi, to just say that Prof. Kibugi and his co-authors, Prof. Patricia Kameri-Mbode and also Dr. Kabira, they've in fact just co-edited a publication which is titled Environmental Governance in Kenya Implementing the 2010 Constitution. And this is a wonderful piece of work that Prof and colleagues have done. Prof, of course, sits on a number of bodies globally, regionally, and also nationally. And I do want to just highlight one or two of them. For instance, he's a member of the World Commission on Environmental Law, and he's also been, since 2016, the editor of the International Yearbook on Soil Law and Policy. And so, Prof. Kibugi, welcome to the University of Pretoria. It's a great honor to have you. Karibu, welcome, and over to you.
Well, good morning to you, everyone, at the Senate conference this morning. It's indeed a pleasure to be invited to speak to you and to learn. And thank you very much for the very kind introduction received this morning. Greetings all the way from Nairobi, alongside the equator, where the weather doesn't really know what it should be. It should be very hot and dry. It's been raining, and generally the climate has been very moody in this part of the continent at the moment. So I will share my screen so that I can get started on the discussion that we have this morning. It's good to see the theme of the conference being on engagement with the community in a circular manner for societal transformation. And this morning I've been invited to speak with us on generally understanding and engagement with communities as equal partners in the context of teaching, learning, and research. And in order to do this in an effective manner, I've taken an approach to use my own experience in undergraduate law teaching, and of course there could be more experiences at graduate level, but undergraduate law teaching is more interesting in terms of the things we've been able to do with students. So I'll start from there. In the years that I've been at the University of Nairobi and generally engaged with universities, we have seen the functions of a university in a fairly traditional sense, teaching and research, but have also seen in recent years, and actually more than recent, emerging functions, particularly engagement with community. Community understood in the form of stakeholders, industry broadly seen to include the private sector, government, civil society, but also citizens generally, but also in recent years as democratic approaches to learning have taken hold in university on the African continent. We're also seeing students themselves emerging as part of the engagement community, and that raises fundamental questions on how universities approach students as a community in manifestations of free speech, in manifestations of human rights in the classroom, etc. And I believe in the last couple of years, South Africa, for instance, has seen this show up rather strongly in various areas. And this does have a bearing even how we engage our students as part of curricular community engagement. Within the context of the law program, the Bachelor of Laws program that I teach on at the University of Nairobi's Faculty of Law, we're currently operating on a 5-year curriculum, a 4-year curriculum that is almost at the end of its implementation. And one of the core philosophies, there are several, in this curriculum is to focus on the training of practice-ready graduates using experiential learning techniques that empower them to holistically solve problems beyond the courtroom and respond to the needs and demands of a changing world. And whereas the curriculum doesn't explicitly refer to, community engagement as such, the idea is nonetheless present in various dimensions. Within the learning expectations as seen in the design of a traditional curriculum, we have experiential learning reserved largely for practice-oriented courses. And this is not necessarily unique to our LLB program. So we have trial advocacy, public interest clinics. So this is clinical legal education, which is the pioneer of curricular community engagement in law studies, where students are engaged in, with the supervised support in terms of helping members of communities reach solutions to legal problems, not necessarily through litigation. And this has strong origins in the US. And then externships where students may be deployed to law firms or even community organizations, community-based organizations, CSOs, to learn on the job. More like a work study program, as we might know it in other disciplines. But this in itself has tended to be reserved for practice-oriented courses in that form. But beyond the scope of practice-oriented courses, which is where I'd like to focus my remarks this morning, the field of environmental law provides opportunity for curricular community engagement through non-doctrinal approaches, which is one of the key tools we have to use, seeing as environmental law is more or less responsive to problems arising from other disciplines, and therefore a non-doctrinal approach is often very useful. And in this sense, looking at the role of university dealing with various actors in the sense of community engagement, we then have the university represented by professors. We have university represented by students. We have the community represented by various stakeholders and students. And you can see that students, as I said earlier, become very critical to this because they sit on two sides of the line or the divide. And there is a delicate balance in pursuit of curricular community engagement, because as university teachers, we have to pay attention to the expected learning outcomes, which the university expects us to follow keenly and pursue through summative and formative engagement. And then there are various pedagogical and andragogical skills that are required. And in my experience, when you're pursuing teaching through curricular community engagement, you have to focus on empowering students with these particularly andragogical skills, because they do need to know how to engage respectfully, with sensitivity, cultural and otherwise, with community members while pursuing an outcome that they may want to pursue. And then in that sense. So what has been my experience with community engagement in university teaching? The premise has been the use of non-doctrinal approaches to legal education and research. And this has generally required equipping students with multidisciplinary skills beyond knowledge, but also how to engage with others, as I spoke about pedagogy and andragogy, but also internalizing what are the parameters of academic freedom that students can bring with them when engaging with communities, but relative to levels of ethics and cultural sensitivity that are required. These may include, for instance, whereas in a classroom setting, students may be encouraged to observe highest levels of academic freedom, but in a community setting, there may be requirements of decorum, deference to seniority, patriarchy, authority that may be counterproductive in challenging, at least for purposes. For purposes of my own experience in undergraduate context, the use of community engagement within the context, for instance, of experiential learning has seemed to work better in upper years, third and fourth year, where this helps to draw on students' lived experiences too, so that they have already some experiences in terms of relations and better depth in legal knowledge. We have done this within one course, which we call land use law, which often aims to balance between land rights and environmental sustainability, which is a fourth-year elective course offered every year. Now, the curriculum generally provides freedom in terms of formative assessment or continuous assessment, while the summative assessment is generally in the form of an exam. So for purposes of formative assessment, I have the freedom to determine how to assign 30 marks. And generally speaking, I have tended to dissuade solo act, so rewarding group effort and requiring group effort, while also demanding that there should be evidence of individual input, which creates strains because not all students are pre-inclined to work with others. But also needing to have prior discussion and to review community and engagement skills with students before sending them out to deal with people. Because again, in addition to learning, they are also representing the brand name of the University of Nairobi and the legal profession at large. In this sense, then, I tend to require students to develop a documentary as the outcome of this formative assessment. And this documentary or docu-report, they would have an identified problem and they would walk through the steps of solving the problem through engagement with a relevant community. They're required to seek consent for interviews and filming, and evidence of this has to be provided because the university as well requires this. Recognition that anonymity where requested must be respected, and this can be done through transcription or use of voice-over recording by the students with verification for authenticity. And where information is provided by community members for background only, this may not be reproduced in the report. And this is necessary because environmental challenges can be quite sensitive in many instances. The students then are required to frame the problem based on an assigned theme. Could be a problem around, for instance, environmental assessments, could be about development, permitting, and control. They're supposed to then identify community members and geographical areas for subject inquiry, develop a rubric that they would follow, undertake field work and interviews, and then plan the docu-report flow, edit videos, and such related outputs towards the outcome. And we often then do our best to invite community members to validate content prior to publication, although this sometimes can be difficult because of distance, etc. And as part of then, we also require students to do the work. No professional services are permitted, and this is verified. And I would like to very quickly demonstrate a sample of such work for purposes of showing what the students are capable of doing, if you permit me. And I won't show all of it because it's very long, but it may be useful to just see some of the effort. And here we go.
We are Group 2. And our legal and land use problem is checking the effectiveness of planning tools in the attainment of sustainable development in the use of land. Our assignment focuses on the tools used in management of land use to ensure that there is sustainable use of the available land resources and sustainable development. It will particularly focus on the tools that are used to manage land use, such as spatial and physical plans. As noted in the National Land Use Policy of 2017, lack of coordination in implementing the country's planning policies resulted in degradation of the available land resources, congestion, and emergence of slums in the urban areas, among other problems. We therefore head to the Clay City area of Kasarani in Nairobi County to check the realities of such a pronouncement by the National Land Use Policy of 2017. This is an area with mixed land uses such as single and multiple user residences, agricultural and residential use of land, together with a significant number of churches and a school within the same area. We hope to interview a number of the residents to get their insights on the effectiveness of land use planning in the area. Having already identified a church whose construction was stopped within a residential area, we managed to get an interview with Donald Joroge, a caretaker of one of the many apartments that will be affected by the church construction.
Your names? What are your names? Okay.
Occupation, kazi yako. Caretaker.
How long have you been staying in this area?
Since 2016.
2016. And
So just I wanted to just pull that up to just demonstrate the type of work that we've been able to do with community engagement. But then again, it's about 10 minutes, and we may not have the 10 minutes to do that. But ideally, what it does allow is for the students to engage, and as you could see in the first sample of the community engagement, was the students making an effort to conceal the face of the person that they were interviewing. And this is because this related to development permitting, which is very contentious. And community members that are part of this discussion would like to use the process, the engagement with the students to bring their truth known, but again, without putting themselves at risk or in conflict with those that are near them. Part of the impacts of community engagement are in terms of cooperative learning, sending students out to the community and engaging in cooperative learning amongst themselves. And we have to see, I have to say that in my experience, we need lawyers that understand that there is more success in dealing, for instance, with environmental learning when you work in cooperation with others. It is also having students learn how to be advocates or activists on key issues, and at the same time provide an avenue for community members to articulate certain issues on the record, but also determine which key issues they wouldn't want to articulate on the record. It also provides an important opportunity to link theory to practice so that we then have students getting an understanding of how what we frame for them in the curriculum looks like in practice. And I've had the luck of students calling me up or writing me up subsequently a couple of years later saying, what we saw when we were doing the community engagement has been very impactful in dealing with subsequent legal or environmental challenges as a lawyer. And then peer-to-peer learning, which is part of cooperative learning, has also been a positive impact as students learn and self-correct, including just the application of digital skills and other innovations to deliver a legal solution. The challenges, of course, have been that there is a cost element to experiential learning. We often have to address ourselves to liability and related risks, and usually have to get clearance in certain instances from the university. Reluctance by adjacent community members to speak on record. It is true that collaborative work is not for everyone, so that's always been a challenge. An interesting aspect has been a reluctance by communities to show innovations on record. So for instance, we had a community where they were doing a good job with cleaning and recycling of wastewater and sewage. but for proprietary reasons, we were not permitted to show the video outside of university settings, which, while understandable, takes away very critical knowledge on what is actually the efforts being done by a community in an informal settlement, or what you might call in South Africa townships. And then again, difficulty in upscaling lessons from community engagements to policy levels in a structured ways. We sometimes have been able to do policy briefs, but difficulty in having students carry on this new knowledge and advocacy to try and deliver a solution. Admittedly, that's not the purpose of set out in the curriculum, but that this should be an interesting way of carrying on, especially in trying to frame students as members of a community for subsequent engagements. I think I'm at the edge of the time that was allocated to me. I'll stop there. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to engagement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Kibuge, for highlighting what respect and collaboration in a community looks like, but also rounding off your presentation by really sobering us up in terms of the realities and that are there when we are going to be embarking on this kind of work. Please could you stay on, because we are going to be doing a Q&A afterwards, and would like you very much to be a part of that. So thank you very much, Prof. So the next speaker, colleagues, is Ms. Priscilla Morley, and Priscilla is a PhD candidate at the Albert Luthuli Leadership Institute, which is abbreviated ALI, and Priscilla will be talking about enabling continuity and sustainability of CCE initiatives in the face of transient nature of the student journey. And I do want to say that Priscilla is currently, as colleagues may know it by its abbreviation, the SDSN, which is the Sustainable Development Solutions Network at ALI. She is the manager there. And prior to joining the SDSN and ALI, she in fact was the director of programs at the Trevor Noah Foundation. And during that time, she was focusing on SDG 4, which colleagues may know is talking about primary and secondary school education. And her span of reach was in South Africa and Africa. And Priscilla is very passionate about developing new leaders, and she's mentored learners and students and also nascent entrepreneurs. So please help me to welcome Ms. Priscilla Morley. Priscilla, over to you.
Am I on? Yes. Okay. I'm going to jump right in. A touch point can simply be described as any moment when one individual gains an impression of another through some form of interaction. The interaction may alter how any individual feels and whether they choose to interact with the other person or not. Multiple touch points create a journey and influence a journey, with the ultimate goal being providing a person with a positive experience and allowing the space for the person to become better than what they were. Touch points are key points of contact and opportunities to make a difference. At the University of Pretoria, there are over 60,000 opportunities for touch points in the form of students. The question is, how do we touch individuals and make a positive difference? Good morning, Interim Vice-Chancellor, Professor Themba Mosia, the Executive, Program Director, and esteemed guests gathered here today. I would like to thank you for affording me this opportunity to address you at this important gathering. I am both excited and terrified in equal measure. Before I share my story on enabling community continuity engagement and sustainability, I will briefly introduce myself. My career started in social work many moons ago, where I had a very brief stay. I have spent my entire career in socio-economic and community development, serving in various roles. For this presentation, I'll focus on the last two roles prior to being appointed as Network Manager for the SDSN on the 1st of January 2024. As Professor Flavia mentioned, the network is hosted by the Albert Luthuli Leadership Institute. I'm sure in this room I'm the shortest serving employee, but the benefit is I come into this engagement with fresh eyes and ears. While working in corporate with a large financial services company for 6 years, that is this first photo, this one right there. As a sustainability specialist, I was responsible for managing the National Corporate Social Responsibility Program. The program intended to involve 14,000 staff in initiatives to support communities. The second photo reflects my move to the Trevor Noah Foundation, where I served as the Director of Programs, overseeing the programs, monitoring and evaluation, research and learning, and communications teams. TNF operates in 19 schools in Gauteng, reaching close to 20,000 learners in primary and secondary schools. While I was at TNF, I led the process of onboarding 16 of the 19 schools they currently work with. As previously stated, I joined the ALI this year, and I really wanted to work with the ALI because I'm passionate about transdisciplinary approaches to addressing sustainability challenges. In addition, my journey and experience with the ALI has led me to embark on a PhD for my sins, focusing on the role of transformative experiences in sustainability leadership development. I'm going to share my story on the impact of community continuity engagement, firstly professionally, in my career, and secondly personally, as a member of a family. My story starts during my employment at the financial services company. This company continuously spoke about being the best and employing 1% of the top talent in the country. So the best employer, the best in terms of product offering, the most innovative, and employees being top achievers. There was even a recognition program for top achievers called Star Awards. That is how serious they were about being the best. Therefore, delivering the best corporate social responsibility intervention, which could be presented on local and international fora, became a big focus of mine. The company decided to partner with a community called namely Orange Farm, which is located 60 kilometers from the Sandton headquarters. Orange Farm's basically very close to the Vaal, and to get there you need to go through a toll gate, that's far. The company committed to partnering with the community for a period of 5 years and referred to this intervention as its social value model. The community was selected because it was characterized by high unemployment, dilapidated health facilities, and young people who were trying to start businesses were really struggling because of a lack of opportunity in the area. Within the corporate space, this company was demonstrating innovation because its social value model concentrated on one community for an extended period of time, addressing very specific focus areas, namely youth, health, and entrepreneurship. The model also included employees volunteering their billable hours and sharing their expertise with various community stakeholders. This work was right up my alley, and I was going to ensure that I aligned with the organization's vision of being the best in everything by making sure that high numbers of staff got involved, volunteered their time, and the community felt supported. It was advantageous for the company as well, because these billable hours were reported on the environmental, social, and governance scorecard at the end of the fiscal year. This sounds like a winning formula, right? The program was working, other corporates were marveling at the approach, and it was meeting organizational objectives. It was the best. After overseeing this program for 3 years, I started thinking about the sustainability aspect of this community-wide intervention. One thing which didn't happen much in that space was the opportunity to pause and reflect on the now and the future of the social value model. How was this going to carry on beyond us? Was this program even effective? This presented a massive gap in my mind. My thoughts kept returning to those questions, which often weren't met very favorably by my former leaders. This led me to believe that my time at the organization was coming to an end, because I felt like I was ticking boxes. I then started seeking alternative employment, and it's no secret that the job market is quite bad. Thus, I had trouble securing alternative employment. I then thought, because I don't have a master's, my applications are being rejected. So I made up my mind to enroll for the Masters in Development Practice at the Albert Luthuli Leadership Institute. The MDP is affiliated with the Global Association for MDPs and has an interdisciplinary focus. Throughout the program, students have various touch points with guest lecturers from a range of sectors, ALI staff, other students, supervisors, and organizations they will work with for their research case study. The University of Pretoria is one of 4 universities in Africa who offer the MDP. However, the program offered at the ALI is Africa's only program focused on building leadership capacity and competencies to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. The program is purposefully planned, designed, and resourced to develop student competencies in addressing social and environmental justice issues. So this program is what I signed up for. There I was, sitting in the front row of the classroom, listening attentively and taking copious notes. I was going to be the best. The goal was clear. I was going to obtain my master's, land a new job, but while I was at the company, I was going to make sure that sustainability aspects were included in the program, and the program worked well, the organizational objectives were met, and the community felt supported. That satisfied me. The goal was quite clear. What I didn't realize was that I was a touch point to the ALI. The 6 coursework modules and research case study were designed to not only provide me with technical knowledge, but also challenge me to think about what I was doing within my contexts, no matter how small. What was I doing to improve the lives of people and impact them positively? How was I thinking about what change meant for people? How was I including people in the process of changing their lives? How was I influencing leaders to think about social and environmental justice differently? Essentially, what was I doing as Priscilla to make sure that people's lives were impacted positively? Now, this was not part of the plan. I was challenged. I was transforming. During the MDP, one of the activities involved us giving our time to an organization and observing ourselves as leaders. So due to COVID, we couldn't go to organizations. So I decided that I was going to mentor one of the entrepreneurs in Orange Farm. She was the perfect mentee, and I had her in mind. Her name is Adelia, and she owned a construction business. I know absolutely nothing about construction. But I felt I had something to offer because I had also run a small consultancy at some point. Now, Adelia is feisty. She's a go-getter. Close the door, she'll go through the window. Close the window, she'll go through the roof. She hustles, goes outside of her community to find opportunities, and she was in the process of getting herself accredited. So why would I want to mentor someone like that? Because everything was working well. Adelia was always late for client engagements. Not by 5 minutes, by hours. And she didn't really take rejection very well when organizations turned her down because she was late. So that was, for me, the focus with Adelia. I saw such potential, and I asked her if she would have me as a mentor. She accepted, and our journey began. I was meeting all the goals I had set for myself. I was doing the masters, I was making sure the program was sustainable, I was sharing my expertise. Next, I was going to get a new job and move on. Like everything was just coming together so nicely. An unexpected result of this was Adelia also ended up mentoring me. She pointed out a few blind spots that she just suggested I focus on addressing. The important part is that I was actually open to the process, and this is what I had learned in my MDP. The way I had thought about how people impact each other had changed. 4 years later, Adelia and I continue to mentor each other, and her business has grown to servicing clients within her community, being a service provider for other corporates, and now she arrives on time. After completing the MDP, there was no doubt in my mind that I needed to leave the corporate sector. It had to happen with speed. But COVID had me there a bit longer. I didn't want to tick boxes anymore. I wanted to contribute to making a meaningful and long-term impact on people's lives. This led me to thinking more carefully about the organization I chose to work for. While I was headhunted for the position of Director of Programs at Trevor Noah Foundation, I still asked myself whether I wanted to go there. Did the organization's values align with mine? Why would I want to be led by the leader within the TNF? The transformation here was that I was much more deliberate in thinking about my career and where I could best make an impact. My why was very, very deliberate. During my time at TNF, my relationship with the Ali continued in terms of SDG and futures literacy training for our team, another touch point. I wanted my colleagues to have a transformative experience and think about why we do what we do more deliberately. My story continues to moving to working with the Ali, and that is my professional metamorphosis. The second part of my story is how my MDP journey impacted me personally and has indirectly impacted my siblings and my children too. Most of my siblings are employed by large corporations, several of them in very senior roles. When we meet, we generally discuss work, the colleagues we like, the ones we don't like, the bosses we generally don't like, and of course, we focus on our progress to the top. I was always engaged in those conversations, and being the only one who worked in the development sector, I would really just listen. Because I'd listen to what they were saying. I never asked about their corporate social responsibility programs because at the end of the day, what did it have to do with me? I didn't work there, so I couldn't influence them. But I actually could, and I realized that during the MDP. My siblings were touch points, who I could challenge and hopefully influence to address sustainability problems. Now, I wanted to know what they were doing in terms of CSR within their organizations. Please note, I'm number 8 of 9, so I'm talking to the older guys. It is not met well. It wasn't enough for me that their organizations they worked for provided once-off food parcels on special occasions, or painted a wall at a small rundown facility for 67 minutes, while their branding stretched from corner to corner. My expectations of my siblings had shifted. I felt that since they are leaders within their organizations, they could influence CSR, and I could also challenge them to. So I asked them, how did they inform the approach to make sure that employees care about environmental and socio-economic issues and truly engage in the meaningful community service for more than just 67 minutes at a time? Whether they implement my suggestions or not is something I cannot confirm, but I had planted the seed, and I continue to do so. I felt if my family members and I were working on impacting social and environmental justice in our environments, we were making a difference. These two handsome young men, my two sons, aged 25 and 20, are now also employees. And during dinner, they too are asked questions about what their organizations are doing and how they are impacting the lives of other people positively. The quality of conversations around social impact has changed in my family. Two of my siblings even call me for advice on what they can do in their organizations. This was definitely an unexpected outcome of doing a master's. I was the one doing the master's, not my family. How I view my role in society to bring about positive change in the lives of others has changed. Furthermore, I think very differently about education. Yes, students enroll in programs to gain technical knowledge, but I believe there's more to it. The Ali has designed the MDP to give students some form of experience. I believe you cannot complete the program and leave the same way as when you joined. It is designed to be flexible enough to suit non-traditional students' busy lives and also give students the space to select any topic on their case study as long as it incorporates leadership and sustainable development goals. This method also acknowledges that people have a variety of interests, which students are free to concentrate on while doing their case study. I was transformed in a way I didn't expect. Yes, I achieved my goal, which was obtaining a master's, but boy, did I achieve it. The personally transformative process really gave me a different sense of appreciation for completing. One of the biggest lessons was if I expected change, I had to be part of it. But I really had to be part of it. Saying I'm the change I want to see was not enough. I had to be more conscious and deliberate during interactions with different touchpoints. Here are some of the questions which I have not stopped asking myself since I completed the MDP. What does it mean to be a leader in the social responsibility sector? How can we make decisions differently about allocating resources to addressing social and environmental justice issues? In my little space, what am I consciously doing to make sure that people can make a meaningful difference in society? And that brings me to the end of my story. Here are a few takeaways I'd like to leave you with. In designing programs, continue to focus on the whole person and providing students with an experience. The result will most likely be that students want to be more and give more. If possible, include an opportunity for students to consider giving their time to some cause they are passionate about. I believe that in paying it forward, we learn more about ourselves. Individuals don't need to hold a senior position in an organization to lead. In engaging students, please send this message to them if you already don't. Everybody can make a difference. Invite the students you encounter to reimagine leadership and lead in the spaces they operate in. I believe it's important to build opportunities for students to reflect on the process and the journey they have been on. Preparing for today has been part of my reflection. The MDP changed my view of how I could change someone else's life. I have the privilege of coming full circle. I was a student, I graduated, I was able to utilize the knowledge that I had gained. I currently supervise MDP students who are on the same journey as I was, and I've now come into the same system and institution which has had the biggest impact on me academically. And then today, I'm here, speaking at a Senate conference about my journey as a postgraduate student. Talk about growth and transformation. My story is testament to the fact that CCE models can definitely be impactful. My journey with the Albert Luthuli Leadership Institute, led by Professor Derek de Jong, has been truly life-changing. The biggest learning from my experience is that education and acquiring a qualification is more than just about the technical knowledge. It's about the journey, the experience, the various touchpoints. Touchpoints have a knock-on effect. My touchpoints were the connections I made during the MDP with other students, colleagues, my mentee, ALI staff, and so forth. What are your touchpoints going forward? In the words of Albert Luthuli, the test is action. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Priscilla, for using your incredible journey as a lens for CCE. And what I found so powerful in your presentation, I don't even know what to call it, whether it's a presentation or a reflection or a journey, is when you talked about the fact that we should embrace who we were, who we are, and who we are becoming, and also to pause and reflect on the value of our true being. So thank you so much for that. Our next speaker, colleagues, is Professor Liesl Eberson, and she's the director of the Center of Study of Resilience at the Faculty of Education here at the university. And Prof. Liesl will be talking about building social and cultural capital among students to maintain the ethos of CCE. Now, Professor Liesl, who I've worked with and collaborated with, she, in fact, is a registered educational psychologist, and she's also an expert in the social dimensions of resilience. And Prof. Eberson is also the president-elect of the World Education Research. And I do want to just say, as I said, for all the speakers, their bios are in the booklet, but I do want to just mention that Prof. Eberson, through her engagement in global education think tanks and panels and boards, this has really made her quite an influential voice worldwide in education development circles, particularly in informing policy, training and practice for sustainable development and also the transformation. Not only she wrote here in her CV in the global south, but I dare say even in the global north. Colleagues, please put your hands together for Prof. Liesl Eberson.
Thank you, Flavia. And thank you so much for these 2 days. It's very seldom in our work days that we are able to merge the mind, the heart, and the hands. And what a privilege to have 2 days of that. And I do think it brings out the reflective part of us. I am really privileged to share this space with Robert and Priscilla, and thank you for the opportunity. So I did that thing that irritates me when I attend conferences. I changed the title as I was preparing for today. So what I opted to say, rather than the wonderful title that was there and proposed, is to think about the sweet spot. What happens when we do what we're good to address the world and to address the needs of the world in order and in the phase of generating evidence. I just think, here's my clicker. So although I stand here by myself, I'm not here alone. I'm going to talk about a 10-year journey. And because of that, there are many people here who by name I can't acknowledge, but they include about 100 students, 100 researchers, about 2,000-3,000 learners, their families, teachers and school leaders of a particular school on the borders of Swaziland, international partners from a variety of spaces, and I'd like to acknowledge and try to be a custodian of all of our experiences through this presentation today. So about 10 years ago, it was really au fait to talk about higher education, curricula and research community engagement. Us academics really like our acronyms. And for me, higher education, curricula and research community engagement provides a platform to enable well-being in challenged contexts. And it helps us to do the most of what we can with resources available to us to address challenges. My hats, I am an educational psychologist by training. My field of research is in resilience, and I teach in our master's program in educational psychology, career psychology. And a good fit career theory for post-colonial global South spaces is Krumboldt's happenstance learning theory. It's a really pragmatic, hands-on theory, and it argues that if one embraces the up and down nature of life and in careers and look for opportunities in the unexpected, you can do things which have a natural fit with your strengths and interests, and you can be responsive to the twists and turns of life. So it really fits with our resilience lab kind of living in a space such as South Africa. And this is the hat I'm taking for this retrospection on a particular journey we had. So go back to 2004 if you can and try to imagine where you were mid-December, just before going on leave for the holidays. I was in my office on the Groenkloof campus and I received a call from Mr. Henry Fakudi, and he said, and I really did not want, it was still landlines operating. And well, they're still operating, but mostly it's on mobile phones now. And the landline was ringing, and I was thinking, should I answer it, shouldn't I? It's really nearly vacation time. Okay, let me pick up the phone and speak with whoever's calling. And he said, hello, I am Mr. Henry Fakudi. I am calling you from a high school in Mpumalanga, on the borders, close to Osuk with Swaziland. And I would like to ask you, if you would think of partnering with our school. We are a remote border school. We don't have educational psychology services. We have a vast number of learners who are so excited about their futures but don't know what to do with their lives. How about us doing anything? And I said, well, you know, let me think about that. I think this sounds good, but leave it with me. And let's the two of us re-engage in January. His call came at a time where I had finished my PhD in '99, and I read this book by Steddon Watson, Career Psychology, as I was driving back from my first conference ever. It was in Bloemfontein. I was on a complete high about a conference where people could all be talking about things they love. And I read this book, and it was speaking about how we can be responsible in educational psychology. Well, actually in career psychology. And if the content we were teaching were in fact mirroring the spaces in which we lived and worked and trained. At the same time, from then about 99 up to 2004 that I got the call, I started reading a couple of papers from across the world where the question was in psychology, should we think of indigenization or should we think of indigenous psychology as we venture on research and training in various emerging economy spaces? Indigenization would be taking established theories, concepts, therapeutic interventions, and adapting them for use in a specific local space. Indigenous psychology would be to say, step back, partner with potential clients, knowledge in a particular realm, and deciding what well-being and intervention and health could be in a particular space. So, 2004 call for justice also meant that I had to think of this conundrum where we were training, still are training, a very small number of EdPsychs. We are one of the few institutions in our country still training educational psychologists. This year we have 12 educational psychologists enrolled, whereas the demand for educational psychology services is huge. There are hundreds, 10,000s of kids in schools and in villages and in city centers looking for help as to what they are supposed to be doing with their lives. Our model, however, is a one-on-one, exclusive, privileged space of a trained professional seeing a client who can pay money for exclusive services, so that inequality gap with this particular training model will just grow. So what would be responsive educational psychology training? How could we, given the challenges of our South African space, actually train to meet the high demands of educational psychology services? Again, this is not common to our country only. Worldwide, we see that there's the teaching and training psychology is being turned on its head. Other models are being thought of in the global north, in Asia Pacific, in Latin America. This is a question that is driving many psychologists in what they are doing. Then our students also said, this is Temnotfo Nkambule, who said, what we do now is to provide a service which may be irrelevant. And Tebukleni Ngumalo said, the tools of our trade needs to change so that they can be used for social justice too. And Temnotfo also said, any culture has its richness, which shows how people can be happy. And is that not the crux of psychology? For us to enable people to be happy, to live good lives. And my thoughts were, what are we doing currently? One, to be responsible. Are we including the content that is local and matters and relevant to South Africa? And how can we be responsive to the high demand for services? And so, a decade of flourishing learning youth, so another acronym, FLY. We had a FLY in 2005 before we said our wonderful UP FLY mantra. So, how amazing is this? I love how resources follow ideas. So in 2005, January, I get a call from our Department of Research Innovation saying, well, listen, there's higher education training money. Do you have a space to use it at? And I said, you can't. Yes, we have a space. And I called Mr. Fakudi and I said, we're on. Let's see what we can do with these resources available to bring services from the university into this remote space. And this was our first group in 2005. Irma Elof and I took our two groups. We had my husband's bakkie and we loaded everything on it. And it was, as Prof. Ferrer said yesterday, such fun. Such fun to go into a space to see what we were good for. So intended outcomes were obvious over the 10 years. We did provide educational psychology services to learners in that particular school. We did take the 10 groups of EdPsych students to a school, and over a 10-year time frame, we did see how we could be useful, a tool to enable well-being in spaces where maybe such services would not be possible. We did the following. And initially, we just had the academic service learning, but then we realized that we could also bring in our master's and PhD students into this process so that we could develop a distilled body of knowledge around educational psychology given a challenged context. So usually in February and April, we do our prep. In May, we would do 5-day site visits. In June or August, we would, depending on what the space was, if you were an academic service learning student, you'd score all the psychometric media and prepare for a therapeutic intervention visit. If you were a researcher, you would do your transcriptions, you do coding, and prepare as far as you could analysis and results. In September, we would go again, and there would be therapeutic intervention 5 days with groups of learners so that they could understand what possible pathways for them could be in life, and the master's and PhD students could do member validation of results and do some training, because one of the major requirements or needs from the school spaces was for teacher professional development. Teachers did not have opportunities for professional development. October, November, we would do finalized client files for the EdSykes, do data analysis and write-up, and obviously in between we would have additional visits where necessary. However, what caught us by surprise were the unintended outcomes of this community engagement. In terms of curricular community engagement, this is part of the intended one. We had 10 cohorts of students and 2 cohorts also of EBIT, JCP students who participated in one of the spaces. The one group constructed a school library, and the other group helped in the school space with drainage, water, sanitation and drainage. In terms of research community engagement, then we had the Masters in Educational Psychology students. 23 of them completed their dissertations, 11 PhDs completed their theses. We had 34 peer-reviewed articles, 21 of those in Web of Science journals, several books and book chapters. And the internationalization of this really spoke to like-minded scholars globally, where we often made use of cost-sharing models for colleagues from abroad who had similar spaces in their, or similar agendas in their training with ours, and also similar research agendas to ours, collaborating with us. Research funding, we attracted funding. So I'm going to say something that's probably not really popular, but it doesn't take a lot of money to do community engagement, curricular community engagement. It takes commitment, it takes time, it takes a lot of time investment. But if you can cover the cost of transport, it was said yesterday as well, of accommodation, and the rest looks after itself. If you institutionalize curricular community engagement into a module, and it's planned and scheduled for, and it makes sense to a student and to researchers and to staff, then it really is a low threshold, low cost input to get that done. There was also a lot of mentoring of early career scholars, both within the faculty and also across the institution. So here we have these wonderful sessions of postgraduate research. In this one image, now I'm going to try this thing that Louis showed me. There we go. So these are moms of some of the children who received educational psychology services. And we wrote a particular book, Partnering for Resilience, and we went to the school and had a wonderful celebration to show how the partnership had contributed to building knowledge to train educational psychology students. And on this day, it was an opportunity for parents to also be able to say, oh, this I remember. That was part of my son. This I know was an uncle's child. And that is what is meaningful. I think that reciprocity in communication. Another unintended outcome then, as I said, was knowledge generation. So on the one signature space in which we contribute knowledge and which we endeavor to continue with is to think of psychological assessment. I don't know if any of you have ever been for psychological assessment. Dis nie lekker nie. It is not nice. If you sit there and you receive a piece of paper asking you questions, a whole list of questions, it's already daunting. If you do that and it's your own language, it's quite daunting. If you read that and you understand the words and you still have to answer, that's daunting. If you receive that and you're a learner on the borders of Swaziland, somebody else is translating the psychometric measure to you because you don't really understand what it means and needs to explain to you certain words in that. How valid is that measure? What are we measuring? Are we measuring how somebody measures up to somebody else's conceptualization of well-being, or are we actually really being useful to enable progress and transformation in a young child's life? So a lot of what we do is trying to understand what types of psychological assessment measures can we develop, and how can we customize them to be used in groups, not only one-on-one for individuals. Then also another space in which we have been contributing knowledge and evidence is teacher resilience in challenged contexts. So South Africa has become one of the leaders in the domain of teacher resilience knowledge. And there's few spaces as challenged as a remote rural school space to understand and define, conceptualize, and systematically gather evidence on than in a rural school. And so many of the teachers in the rural schools with whom we've partnered have contributed to this teacher resilience knowledge. Then also resilience in challenged rural contexts has become a signature this area where we've distilled resilience knowledge. And again, we pay homage to this initial partnership that made that possible. I spoke about the mentoring early career scholars. Many of them are people who are leaders now in spaces where, as Priscilla said, they are touch points and of change. We spoke about the internationalization and research funding that we received. And I would like to end with this idea that any curricular community engagement, but especially also curricular and research community engagement, where we bring the service with the knowledge generation, is a very low threshold pathway for us to give back taxpayer money, to close that loop of investment. Why do I say that? If you think just of this one case study with educational psychology training, what did we touch on in terms of SDGs? We touched on good health and well-being, obviously on quality education, decent work and economic growth. But because of the mode, the community engagement mode of this, we also touched on partnerships, SDG 17. South Africa is so good. South Africans, maybe Africa, in terms of partnering, networking, collaborating, and this was hands-on, how the students learned it, how researchers learned it, how partners across international spaces, stakeholders in schools, government level, NGOs, all partnered. In addition, inequalities. There's no space to realize your privilege than when you exit your privilege. That sanitized clinical space of one-on-one educational psychology, to realize that maybe that's not the primary space in which you can be useful. Maybe you should go to where inequality is high and where you are a resource and where you can matter. Oh, these two I'm going to show together. Maybe I think there's a third one actually, yeah. So it took me a long time to realize that when I was training as a psychologist, we were never asked, what is the role of water in your quality of life? What is the role of stable electricity supply in the quality of life? What is the role of nutrition? It takes one to go to a different space to think that if you think of health and well-being and you train for health and well-being, that you also need to let the supplier, the enabler of opportunities for health and well-being, to think that their client may not have access to a quick YouTube video, or a teacher may not be able to have laptops for every child to quickly do an intervention that can matter for many people. Or that you can be in a school and for a whole day not be able to have clean water, either for drinking or for sanitation. And that also matters for the way in which you negotiate your well-being. So after 10 years, we had the partnership from 2005 to 2015. And a question that remains with me is, one, how do we systematically document impact? This was a planned happenstance endeavor. we did not start with a baseline of where we were at in order to measure what impact is. So could we as an institution develop a protocol where we say, if you're going to do this, how do you systematically document impact? How do you systematically then document and talk about that impact to attract funding, should it continue? And then thirdly, how do we institutionalize it? Maybe we will be going nowhere very slowly if we just have a mishmash of small-scale community engagement projects all over the place. Maybe if we institutionalize and coordinate it, we could have much more of an intended, deliberate impact as a university. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Prof. Everson, don't go too far away. Can I please ask the speakers to take their seats? And I firstly want to say thank you so much for your presentation. Especially, I think what I found so interesting is when you asked, is our teaching mirroring the places where we live, play, and work? And I think that was very powerful. So colleagues, I don't see red on the screen, so I'm going to take the liberty of opening up for a Q&A and then ask the speakers to come and take a seat. And I'll also ask if we can just also bring Prof. Robert Kibugi up as well. So we're open for questions, colleagues. I think while we're waiting for the questions, I want to ask both, the three of you, a question. I mean, you all talked about your journeys and how you got to work in this space of, community engagement. What was that thing that made you pivot? Because we have a number of people in the audience. If I look at maybe our faculty, people are busy with their clinical work and they're thinking, oh my goodness, now I have to go into the community. And as Prof. Kibugi was saying, there is a different posture that you have to take. So in the education space, as you said, Prof. Everson, it's very sanitized. But then you go into a space, if I'm a woman of color in this particular, there is definitely a way that I should posture, a way that I should dress, a way that I should be communicating, or even just a woman. And so in essence, you can't just enter a community the way you enter a classroom. So I'm interested in the three of you. What is this thing that made you change and go into community engagement, and what would you advise the colleagues in the audience in terms of just the pivoting to enter the places where you have done such phenomenal work? I'll start. Anybody can start. And also you, Prof. Kibugi.
I think for me the entry point and the remaining point are the same. It's very easy. It's very easy to use community engagement as a vehicle, or to enjoy community engagement as a vehicle to teach, to do research, and to be useful. And so in the end, you can actually tick all the boxes of what we're supposed to be doing as academics just by engaging and partnering with communities. You can have, even if we don't even change the existing performance management system, you can tick all those boxes, attract funding, have wonderful publications, have internationalization, do postgraduate supervision, do your teaching, and while you're doing that, do it in a way that matters, be useful. So it's easy.
Priscilla?
I think for me, and I'll link it to the journey part, it was just the content. I was, like I'll speak as a student, the content that was coming my way was none that I had been exposed to before, but it really just opened my mind about what my community engagement meant. I'd worked with communities for a long time before, so it was like, but what have I been doing? And that was the content was just, and the way the program was constructed really made the penny drop for me. I just saw it in a different way. It wasn't the same anymore.
Wow, that's incredible. Prof. Kibugi, and yourself?
It's how I came into legal education. Before taking an interest in environmental law, I focused a lot more on human rights as an undergraduate law student. And we spent the better part of the 4 years running a legal clinic where engagement with communities was an important part in terms of just to borrow from you, legal education can be very sanitized. And so this gave us a better understanding of the reality. And I think now working in environmental or the broader field of environmental law and land law, the much of the experience that students need, much of the solutions they need to bring later in life is quite untidy. It's very sociological, it's very science driven, it's very affected by economics and so on and so forth. So teaching without bringing that reality to the classroom appears to make the teaching quite pointless later in life. And so this is the basis for this kind of attitude.
Something.
Yes, absolutely.
I also think a part of this is that curricular community engagement and research community engagement provides us a systematic way of showing what we're good at in the Global South. So it gives us a base on which to generate knowledge that we provide to Global North discourses on what good practices are to address challenges, rather than waiting apathetically for solutions to come from a space that is not our space. It is to say this is lived experience and lived knowledge, documented knowledge of what works in the Global South for particular global challenges. And very seldom, if you teach in a classroom, will you have that impetus, that drive, the energy of being reminded of what we're good at and what we know and how we can champion and share that to the Global North.
Thank you. Colleagues, any other questions? Yes.
Good morning. Thanks, everybody. I would like to direct my question to Prof. Kibuki. As an environmentalist and a land lawyer, what role or contribution do indigenous communities make, especially in the policy and bylaws, and also in climate change issues? I'm saying this, Prof, because some of these laws are anti-indigenous knowledge practices. And I'm asking this so we can learn from your country, especially the involvement of indigenous knowledge holders. Coming to Ms. Mali I see your research interest include leadership and leadership development and sustainability. I know the leadership is broad, but how can the indigenous knowledge holders, because they are leaders in their own rights, how can we make them to see that they must see themselves as leaders, not as curtain raisers or addendums of other people? Thank you.
So, Prof. Kibuki, over to you. And yours is really about indigenous knowledge system. And then to Priscilla, it's really about how do we not make, leaders or even people that we are working with in the leadership space just as addendums to. Prof. Kibuki, over to you.
Well, thank you. Historically, legal systems are usually defined by the dominant groups. Hegemony is part and parcel of governance. And it's really not to do with democracy, but about power dynamics. And so in my country, indigenous communities have had the disadvantage of lacking voice. Historically, not just having voice, but having meaningful voice in the policy space in terms of representation. And this then has had a bearing on how the recognition of rights, especially land rights for indigenous people, as we generally know, for instance, about the Ogiek community and their global struggles in courtrooms. But one of the saving graces, and it shouldn't be this way, but again, the benefit of democratic systems is that access to court has become one of the means through which indigenous communities have sought to reclaim their voice by using the provisions in the constitution and the approaches by the judiciary in terms of independence to voice and to frame and demand the recognition of their rights. And that remains to be an incomplete process. But the second approach has been the progressive and fairly well progressing framing of the concept of free, prior, informed consent, particularly when dealing with questions of land rights for communities. And this is also coming along. But I think eventually a more equitable approach to voice for indigenous communities, for local communities, a strong, equitable, and unrepentant voice. This is what we actually require. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Priscilla?
Thank you for your question. I don't think I have the perfect solution because I'm still on this PhD journey. But I think in thinking about the indigenous spaces, firstly, we need to allow the space, and the indigenous space needs to be open to it. It's not an easy space to operate in, but I think in terms of leadership development, it should be about the two-way journey, the space to speak about it and the space to be impacted by the leadership, by leadership.
I've also come to realize that we, as researchers and academics, in order to have an equal, egalitarian way in which we acknowledge power and voice, we have to think differently. So as researchers, for example, we are trained not to use people's names and not to have people's faces on images. And we've had to adjust our ethics protocols when we work in spaces where we co-generate knowledge to ask somebody, would you like your name to be attached to this? Do you want to be named? Would you like your face to show? So this is not the usual way in which to do things, but this is the way when you co-generate knowledge that you have to ask. You can't assume that you will anonymize and obliterate a person from a space just because ethics sanction that you don't acknowledge a person. And then there are wonderful methodologies, emancipatory methodologies. There's democratizing research. Gaventa has written a lot on that. There's participatory methodologies where from the onset, people speak with each other to ask, how do we want to do this? Not just assume how people want to do it.
Thanks. I'll take one last question.
I think that's lady here.
Thank you. Specifically to Prof. Eberson, but not only to her this question, to all of us here in terms of, we know that in community engagement, one of the things is that it should be a mutual benefit, and linking that to the issue of impact. I just want to find out in terms of how much do we document in terms of the impact in relation to access to higher education, given that some of the places that work with Fly in particular, it's a remote area, and with that focus on career psychology. So I'm interested in that access to those learners in the rural area, to UP in particular. Thank you.
So I do think at a stage in that Flourishing Learning Youth project, many of the EdPsych students actually became UP recruiters. Because that was the first hands-on information they had available to give to that. Unfortunately, we did not track that. So for me, that is a deficit, probably, definitely in the 10-year project we did, and certainly I think in others in the university, because we aren't intentional about measuring and tracking and systematically documenting impact. we take the planned happenstance approach. We feel, oh yeah, it's good, there's need here, we can supply, let's do that and let's move on. So I have no idea of what that is. We have all 3,000 learners as client files, so we could probably retrospectively go track how many of them did actually then come to the University of Pretoria and what the trajectory of their study success was. That could be a nice study to do.
Yeah, so I want to thank our speakers really, because we're out of time, and as a closing remark, we have this architecture at the university. Community engagement is messy, not always in the KPA. What is the one thing in 1 second that you would change? I'll start with you, Prof. Everson.
Oh, Mia.
No, you've got the prof, I'm Miss.
Let me go to Kenya.
Yeah, let's
Prof. Kibugi.
Well, I mean, I think there has been a continuous debate as to how relevant university education is to the solutions, the dynamic nature of solutions that we need to various challenges facing humanities and societies across the board. And structurally speaking, there is always the question as to, are the pedagogical techniques we continue to apply in teaching suitable? You know, historically, for instance, in law, we trained lawyers to work in conventional practice, go to court, support clients, but we see a demand for these skills elsewhere. So how well are we preparing them to think, handle problems that are not just high-level client-oriented in an office setting, community-type problems, work in academia, work in parliament, etc. Those are structural questions that I think the discussion today in this context is useful to as we prepare curriculums, as we reflect on our successes, etc. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. So if we want to institutionalize curricular community engagement, how do we do it? And if that is too complex, because I think it could be really complex, can we develop a protocol for everybody who does already? We heard how many projects are ongoing anyway already, for each of those projects to document systematically impact. Decide on a metric, measure it systematically, and report on that.
For me, it's definitely including more of the experience, the practical parts of it, and focusing on the mindset and how do you create that what do you do with people's minds and how they think and how they engage. That would be something I'd do more of.
So colleagues, I want to say thank you so much, and to our amazing speakers for really just shaking our tables and also giving us wonderful insights, particularly on the architecture for the university. So that ends our session. Thank you so much.
Okay, colleagues, welcome back. Please take your seats. We're already slightly behind schedule, so there's still a couple of people outside, so while we're waiting for them, I'm going to share a little anecdote with you. Some of you might be wondering why I'm here for discussions around curricular community engagement. And in the last session, the point was made about being aware of risk and liability. My office this year received a letter of demand from a community engagement partner for the sum of 80,000 rand to install a swimming pool pump, paving and a LAPA. And their story was that a group of our engineering students had gone to do a community service project there. They had 60 hours. How on earth they thought that a group of 4 or 5 students could actually put together plans for a swimming pool, get authorization and approvals, build a swimming pool, a LAPA and a paved area within 60 hours escapes me. So obviously it's important to set expectations. But in this particular instance, they started digging the hole for the swimming pool. And of course the going was very slow. So the partner brought in a front-end loader and dug a huge hole. in the middle of their exercise field for the dogs. The partner was a dog rescue. So in any event, long story short, when the students left, of course, there was a very large hole. There was no paved area, and there was no LAPA, because the LAPA that the students had started to install didn't meet the expectation of the partner, and the poles weren't high enough, so they removed them. So in other words, they undid everything that the students had in fact done. And they sent us a bill to give them what they had agreed that the students should provide. So I thought, well, I better just, I've seen just about everything in the time I've been in this office, but this one was a new one for me, and I thought, let me take it to the Executive Director of Finance and get her input on this. And I said to her, we have this community engagement partner, the students went here, we might just need to make sure that we're covered for insurance, etc. Which just goes to show how our perspectives differ, because my focus was, what are we going to do about the money? Do we have any legal liability here? Professor Kurnoff's focus was, this is a pit bull rescue, and there were 35 pit bulls there while our students were there, with the potential of danger to life and limb. So, yeah. So that's what I'm doing here. Okay, colleagues, I think everybody is now back from tea, so we're going to move into part 2 of the discussion on reimagining the curricular community engagement program. And I think that we will have gathered from the first session, which I thought was exceptionally good, that it doesn't matter what each of us does as long as we do something, and that if you don't think you can make a difference, to quote someone at a recent mentoring award ceremony, if you don't think that you can make a difference, you've never been in a dark room with a mosquito. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, the next speakers in this session will be Professor Marietta Visser from the Department of Psychology in the Faculty of Humanities, talking about teacher stress and well-being intervention. I'm sure you will all be listening very carefully to this, as we are all of us teachers at heart. And then she will be followed by Dr. Henry Taljaard-Swart from the Department of Consumer and Food Sciences in the Faculty of Natural and Agricultural Sciences. And she will be speaking on threaded tales, weaving bonds beyond the needle's touch, and stitching communities together with creativity. And then finally, we will have the engagement of Ms. Amy Lombard, who is a Master in Consumer Science student in clothing management. So I'm not going to interrupt between the speakers. I'm going to let them just flow in the order that I have just introduced them. So over to you, Professor Visser.
Good morning, colleagues. I will not put the pit bulls on you. I was very impressed with the speech of Liesel Eberson, because I think we relate very much to the same things. I started as a counseling psychologist, and my first research project in my career was, what is the role of the psychologist in the promotion of mental health in the country? While psychologists work very hard, they didn't make a dent. And they're still not making a dent. Because of one-to-one work is never going to do it. So I switched to community psychology. In a way, you have a broader field there, because you work with individuals, you work with groups, but you also work with communities to look at what is the structures where people live and where they work in, and how can you improve the whole environment where they are, so that you can improve mental health. So in a way, that is a broader thing. So I teach community psychology to the postgraduate students. And every year I involve them in a project. One of the definitions of community psychology is to take the psychological knowledge that you have and to transform that into something workable, so that you can help communities and people in communities to address the current problems that they experience. And that you cannot do in the classroom, and you cannot do that from a textbook. So that is something that you have to do in practice. Therefore, I involve all the students every year in a community project. So they start with a project and they have to deliver every year. So the one I want to focus on this year is the project for teachers that we have done the past 2 years with the community psychology group is usually 6, and last year they were 7. And they deliver the whole project, they develop it and evaluate the whole thing. Can I get the third slide, please? I do what? Sorry. What do I do? Okay, that is one. No. Back. Okay. The partners in this project was the Department of Psychology in terms of me and the students. The students did the development of the intervention. The Gauteng Department of Education, who approved the program and who were helping in the recruitment of the teachers. And then the teachers of Tshwane South schools who volunteered to participate. So they participated in the intervention, they shared their experiences, and they evaluated the intervention. The way we did it was through action research. We started with a situation analysis. We explored the teachers' experiences and their stressors. At this stage, we had about 122 teachers from 6 primary schools and 3 secondary schools to participate in focus groups, discussions, and a short survey, so that we can find out what are the issues, what do they want us to address. The stressors that they gave us, the large classes, some up to 90 children in a class, that the students were disruptive, problems at home, high administration levels that they have to cope with, and that there's no work-life balance. Back at school, when we were back at the university, we tried, how are we going to address this? Because we cannot change the salaries, we cannot change the workload, so then we have to change the whole department, and we cannot really change the homes the children come from. So what can we do? As psychologists, we can work with the people and we can help them to deal with the issues they have to deal with. So that was our focus. If we can empower these individuals to focus on what they have to do and to do that as well as they can in a healthy way, then we can help them. So that the program we developed was an 8-session program on stress management, how to identify it, how to manage your daily stressors, on burnout and self-care, time management. The third one was on emotional awareness and mastery. Fourth one, managing of anger through assertiveness training. Building relationships and boundaries. Competencies, strengths, and meaning. That was really a wonderful session because they explored their own strengths and they it was as if they came alive. So the first 6 were sort of general sessions that everybody can participate in, and even you might volunteer for some of these sessions. The last 2 was more focused on the school as themselves, understanding the children's emotions. What is serious issues, when do they have to refer, and sort of how to deal with the emotional issues of the child. And the last one was on classroom management and discipline. Not that we know how to manage such large classes, but we had a discussion group, and they could share ideas of what worked and what didn't work, and how can they manage these huge groups. Back in the field, it was implemented in a small workshop format with a few teachers in each session. It was a workshop style, meaning that was collaboration. The student would do some psychoeducation, a little bit of introduction, and then give them an exercise, and through the exercise they will deal with the issues that come up. They will share their experiences and see if there's any solution to their problems. It was presented once a week for about 3 months, over a period of 3 months, as was possible in the afternoons after school. Difficult for teachers to come afternoons after school because there's many activities going on and they are also tired after a work day. So over the 2 years, we had 120 teachers who volunteered and 70 who completed the course. The recruitment was difficult. We tried to recruit per school, but that doesn't work so well. What worked the best was there's a contact person in the education department, and they send an SMS to on their groups, and all the teachers in the area get it, and then they could respond. And that we will use that again because that's a very effective way, and they clearly volunteer to come. We used a mixed methods designed to evaluate session-by-session feedback on what the teachers learned. We had a pre and a post intervention before and after, so we looked at perceived stress, depression and anxiety, hope and thriving. So the benefits and the impact. This is where yesterday I felt very, very chuffed with myself when the impact story came, because we have to make a real impact. And in this project, how small it is, you can see how the people change. You can see how they start dealing with their own issues and can make a difference in themselves. So some of the teachers said they gained understanding of themselves, they learned how to identify stressors and cope with it, they learned to take care of themselves. One said, I learned more about myself and the person I truly am. We all have stressors. We all have strengths that we can use in the workplace, at home, and everywhere. I want to focus on the last quote there. That was sort of, they've written in their evaluations. One said, this was the very most and important session I ever attended. They have many courses, these teachers. I now feel that I am in control of my life and no one else. It has developed me as a person and improved who I am. And that is what we wanted. We didn't want to teach them anything. We wanted them to be themselves and to learn more about themselves and to cope with the issues they have. So that was a very personal thing. And we also experienced that we need that to do with all the other role players in mental health. Psychology cannot do this alone, so psychology is trying to empower other people like the nurses, the community health workers, so that they can assist us in identifying people with issues and also with structured interventions on a basic level so we could prevent serious problems from happening. So yes, the teachers did benefit, but it was not only the teachers that benefit. Sorry, there's still quantitative results. There was an improvement. Hope didn't improve, but all the other things did improve. The most improvement was in terms of thriving, that they experienced themselves as positive and life as a good experience. The research part also benefited because a student completed her MA dissertation about that. And then there will be 2 research papers published on it, so the university also got their share. And the students benefit from that. Dylan will come in just now, I just want to read that, and Dylan will come and explain their experience as master's students doing the program. What I think is that students had a difficult role. They had the role of a professional person, and they worked with professionals. They didn't work with children or people that's sort of easy. They worked with professionals, and very difficult professionals as well. They gained confidence. They learned about group functioning and power dynamics in groups. They learned how to present psychological contact in a practical way so that people can benefit from that, and how to create a democratic context for learning. This community action creates opportunities for co-creation of knowledge with mutual benefits for the teachers, the students, and the lecturers. Over to Dylan about his experience.
Good morning. My name is Dylan, and I was part of the master's group last year who basically went out there to do the project with teachers. So thank you for allowing me to gate crash this conference. So as a novice clinician, going out there to interact with teachers was rather an eye-opening experience for me. I will be speaking in behalf of the 7 of us. The one thing that we realized out there is that the significance of the relationship between the structural issues that teachers face in their working environments and its relationship with their mental health. When we did the intake, so when we went to firstly find out what can we assist them with, majority of the issues were structural. And our first meeting as a group was rather concerning because we didn't know what we were going to do with the issues. Mostly, as Prof has indicated, we're complaining about things that were beyond psychology. However, having sat down and brainstormed on how we can actually work with these teachers, it was rather fulfilling to see that even the most basic things that we can actually do could be helpful for teachers. Teachers wanted to be heard, and mostly they wanted to be validated. So we sat down throughout the 8 sessions that we had with teachers where, although we did use psychological research to come up with ways in which we can help them beyond their structural challenges, we used the 8 sessions to help them feel heard and to help them feel validated. We often think that the most troubling things that teachers go through are mostly structural, but there are the basic things that we saw that teachers out there are not receiving from their work environments. Them receiving sessions like we gave them where they can just talk about their feelings and their experiences was extremely beneficial. From the feedback that we got, we could see that teachers have just never been given a chance to talk about how they feel. Sometimes they don't need solutions, they just wanted to be heard and validated. So our experience was extremely eye-opening as to there's so much that can still be done for teachers out there. However, we as the 2023 group felt that we did contribute something to the country by helping these teachers feel heard and validated. Sometimes all they ever needed, especially for most of the ones that we saw, most of the things that they needed from us was not answers and solutions to their problems. They just wanted to be heard. So I think this program and this intervention itself contributed immensely through psychology, through how we can actually help teachers. Teachers play a crucial role and a significant role in the development of children, not only academically, they also contribute socially and interpersonally. And therefore, when their mental health is impacted, so is their effectiveness as teachers. So our experience and my personal experience myself was extremely humbling and fulfilling to see that there's much that can be done for teachers even beyond the structural means. So yeah, I just came to contribute that, and thank you so much.
Okay, good morning everyone. I must say we feel very honored to share our story with you today. I want to say thank you to Prof. Paulette Bloemer for nominating us, and then to Prof. JB Dudu, who is always encouraging us and supporting us in these endeavors. So our story that we're going to tell is in the form of a threaded tale. We are going to show you how we have been weaving bonds beyond the needle's touch and to stitch communities together with creativity. And what I mean by that is we are from the Consumer Science Clothing Retail Management Group, and we had a visit with the trustees of Mapula Embroideries about 6 years ago. It was over a cup of coffee, and somebody had linked us up together saying, you do embroidery, you do clothing, see how you can make it work. And it started out as a conversation where we actually had to figure out what they need, what we can provide, what we need, and we didn't know that it was going to actually evolve into something so real and creating so much experiences for the students, for the lecturers, for the trustees, and then for the community members. Okay, so on the one side, we have our big Consumer Science Clothing Retail Management final year students. They are in the Department of Consumer and Food Sciences in the Faculty of Natural and Agricultural Sciences, and we have about plus minus 30 students per year. On the other side, we have the Mapula Embroidery. They are a non-profit organization. They have a few trustees who are based in Pretoria, and the trustees basically assist with training. They do the marketing and then the selling of the products. And then we have the Mapula ladies that actually live in the Winterveld, who are the designers, the tracers, and the embroiderers. So just to give you a little bit of context of where this project fits into the bigger picture, we have a subject or module called product development that our final year students do. It's one of the capstone modules for the B Consumer Science Clothing Retail Management degree. And we have been doing this project for the last 6 years. It's ongoing, and I don't believe it's going to stop soon. I think we're going to keep on having this wonderful collaboration, and we're going to build on it every year. So in the last 6 years or so, we've had plus minus 150 students come through the project, take part in the project, and then take something from it when they go out and graduate. And we've also had about 60 community members that have been involved in the project. Okay, just to give you a little bit of context of what the module is all about, it's a module that revolves around entrepreneurship, how to start your own business, and then the product development process. Now, a cornerstone of this module is to do everything that we mentioned above with the thoughts and consideration of the 3 pillars of sustainability, which is the environment, the people, and the planet. We also consider sustainable development goals, specifically SDG 8, 11, and 12, which are focused on the economic growth, the sustainable cities and communities, and also then sustainable production and consumption. So where does it all fit in? In 2018, these discussions started. The Mapula Embroideries Trust actually said, you know what, we have a need to be able to train these ladies a little bit better in terms of sewing. They are very good at the embroidery already, but they haven't gotten to the part where they can actually take the embroidery and transform it into a product that is sellable. They also said that they might need a little bit of help in terms of product development, because they have a very specific market, mainly international tourists who buy these products, and they would like to expand their target market to the South African market as well. So these needs were quite well aligned with what we had in our module already. So in 2019, we registered as a community engagement project. We sat, myself and the founder and one of the trustees of Mapula Embroidery sat together, and we made sure that we develop or adjust the module so that it benefits not only us and our students, but also the community members involved. So at the end of the day, what we wanted to do is to create and sustain these sound business practices while we are still positively influencing the environment and the society, and also contributing to the economy of the country. Okay, so 6 years ago up until now, it started very basic in terms of what the collaboration entails, and it has been growing ever since. We've had some training sessions with them. We don't just get the products and transform it into something new. We're actually at a point where we are co-creating, and the students are sitting with the community members, and we are also at the point of where we are actually doing some experimentation to enable them to enhance their products. We're going to go into a little bit more detail in terms of what we did every year and how we've potentially built on that to make it something truly enriching for all parties involved. So in year 1, we didn't know exactly what we want to do, so the agreement was we would purchase already made squares, raw squares of embroidery from Mapula Embroideries, and we would provide the students with that, and we'd tell them, you know what, use this embroidery, incorporate it into your business, into the collection that you're going to design, and you must take into consideration that these are artworks They're not just pieces of fabric that you need to incorporate, so you can't just cut through the artworks. You need to consider that the artwork needs to be the statement of this garment. Additionally, we told them that we want step-by-step production guidelines of how you actually constructed this garment, and it had to be in a simple and visual way to make it understandable for a whole range of people. Later on in the year, after they'd made the collections, we actually got the Mapula embroidery ladies, I think we got about 6 of them, to come to the Department of Consumer and Food Sciences, and we actually had a training session with them. We actually took them through the processes of making an apron, which they had already been doing, but we took them through the processes of ensuring a better quality product at the end of the day. So these are a few of the examples that the students came up with in 2019, where they then showcased the Mapula embroideries as part of their collections and businesses. So you can see it is black fabric and colorful prints. Now in 2020, we had a little bit of a curveball. In March, we had our lockdown, and I think on the 12th of March, before the lockdown started, we actually had our field trip to Mapula Embroideries in the Winterveld with, I think it was about 21 of our students that year. And what we decided to do that year was we want there to be a little bit more interaction between the community members and the students. And as you can see on one of the pictures over there, we sat with the community members. They had already made designs, and we asked the students to choose some, and they actually traced it onto a fabric, and then we left that with the embroiderers. They embroidered it for us, and we then, with the help of the trustees, got it back to Pretoria, which we then couriered to the students wherever they were for the lockdown, so that they can continue with their practicals in that way. So 2020 was already a curveball for us, but we tried to make it work, and we tried to improve on what we did in 2019. Now, there you can see a little bit more Mapula embroidery on the garments, but still very basic black fabric and then colorful prints. So 2021 and 2022 were quite similar. We still couldn't do field trips, so we could not go and take the students to the Winterveld to actually chat with the ladies and design with them. So what we did is we told the students, you have a pattern piece that you want embroidery on. You have to actually make notes and pin it to your pattern piece and say, I want flowers on it, or I want animals on it. And in that sense, you have to tell them what kind of theme your business idea is revolving around. Now, the trustees also told us you have to think about the capabilities of the embroiderers. They only know how to do a certain amount of things. So they gave us 4 themes, and the students had to choose from that. We sent it to them, they embroidered, we sent it back, and they incorporated it. Later on in the year, we were actually able to do sewing training because a need came up to actually to just recap and to improve those maintenance skills and those sewing skills of the ladies. And at that point, it was very nice for me, as the module coordinator, as a lecturer, to actually just stand back and observe what was happening. I'm much more of an observer and a listener than I am a speaker, actually. And at this point in time, I actually saw the students then teaching the community members and standing in the other side of the teaching learning scenario, and where these community members are really taking in and practicing and learning new skills. Okay, and those are some of the ones that we had those 2 years. And then this is a booklet that they compiled after that workshop that they gave to the community members so that they could actually then use it if they had maybe missed something, or that they can then go and distribute in the Winterveld amongst the ladies. So it's very basic terms, what the parts are of your sewing machine, how to trace patterns, how to do basic quality assurance techniques like trimming, like, for example, pressing, which was a big thing. Everybody knows how to use an iron, but you don't necessarily know how to use it specifically to make it a better quality product. And then at the end of the day, they also showed them how to make a little cell phone, fully lined cell phone bag that they can then use to sell on their website. Okay, in 2023, Emmy was a final year student, so I'm going to give it over to her to tell us about what they did in 2023 and what the experience was.
Right. So COVID was finally finished, full-fledged, and we could come back and we could experiment a bit. So we got into the product development, specifically in the fabric, the design, and the thread. So with regards to the fabric, we were specifically told, stop using black cotton fabric and try something new. So we started using denim, we used linen, different cotton types of blends and such. Everything just had to be non-elastic, which was quite easy to find. Regarding the design, we were also told we could now explore with the Mapula ladies. We could ask them to fill it in, we could ask them to just do outlines, and we could ask them to make specific designs at the end of the day. And with regards to the thread, typically Mapula would provide us with a wide range of colors of different embroidery thread. But this year, what they did is they gave us hand-dyed embroidery thread that was so beautiful. I can't even describe it. But yeah, so that allowed us to diversify our products as well as their products at the end of the day. Now, since this was a whole new artistic approach that we tried to take, we had to sit one-on-one with the Mapula ladies again, and this initiated this co-creative, collaborative initiative that we were trying to help them while they help us. Now, obviously, creating with someone else comes with some successes and some challenges. We saw that denim worked very well, different types of cottons worked very well. Linen was a bit of a tricky one. So linen's fabric structure is quite loose. So there's a lot of space. And when the ladies did the embroidery, a lot of the time it was quite heavy. So it would distort the fabric unless it had a good backing fabric. Now, some of the students ran into problems with this where they chose the wrong backing fabric. And then they would, at the end of the project, they would have to manipulate their own product in order to compensate for the mistakes that occurred in the embroidery. But communication was also, I think, the biggest issue amongst all the issues. Because a lot of the times we went to Winterveld with all these brand new ideas of creative stuff that we wanted to do, but the lady said, no, that's not going to work. This isn't going to work out in the entire project. So we had to say, you know what, I trust you. You know what you're doing. You have the skills and the competence. I'm leaving it to you. And most of the time they came back very beautiful, which was beneficial to the end of the project in the university. With the purpose, overall, we try to enrich the students, but the main purpose of this community engagement is to enrich Mapula. So we want to have them expand their products, their styles, expand their diversification, and eventually their target market and their potential profits. And these are some examples of the students from last year. So the first student there on your right, she used hand-dyed embroidery, which gave a very natural and sustainable look to the product, but their backing fabric was not suitable for the design. So they had to manipulate it when the final product was being put together. The second group, they actually found their main fabrics from Ons Winkel. They used bed linen, and it turned out really nicely. What they did uniquely with Mapula is they used outlines of the designs. So they went to Mapula and they said, what do you have? The ladies gave them pre-made designs and they said, okay, do that, but just the outline. And it gave this really simplistic appeal. And the last group used a twill cotton fabric, so it's a bit of a heavier fabric, but they ran into some communication issues. Initially, they said their designs must just be outlines. In hindsight, when they got the designs back, they were filled in. And the students actually said, you know what, it was for the best, because it came out much better than it would have.
Okay. So just to summarize all of that, there have been a few things that have been really enriching. Mapula embroideries have gotten a few training sessions where they have enhanced the skills of some of the ladies. We've done a little bit of product development. It's a very challenging process. You don't necessarily start in year 1 and then in year 5 you've got the product and it's sellable. It's a back and forth of trying to work on the product, trying to develop it, and actually getting it to a point where it is then sellable and makeable. It's enriching for them to work with an external entity, because they have to then take inputs from someone else and not just do exactly what they've been doing for the past few years. So they had a little bit of first of all, I think they were a bit taken aback, but afterwards they said it was actually nice to have somebody else's input in the process as well. And then the university students, I think every time we leave the Winterveld, every time they're done with this project, they say that it was the most exciting and enriching experience for them in their 4 years, that they can end off their studies with something that was real and something that they really contributed to, and working with someone or community members, making it such an overall positive experience for them. So, I mean, they did mention the barriers and the misinterpretation, and that is always an interesting thing. You're going to work with external entities when you graduate, so it's not just something that you're going to do while you're studying, it's something that you're going to take with you when you go into the workplace. Okay.
These are just some quotes from the students. They found this was still in the time when they were teaching the ladies how to sew specific products. So the one student found that she really enjoyed teaching and helping someone else learn something new. She actually found that when she goes into the business one day, she's going to benefit from this because she feels secure in teaching her own staff in the future. The second student just found that these sustainable initiatives and the quality control throughout the entire process is essential, and they're going to be taking that into their career in the future as well. And these were some quotes from the ladies. What's most important when we're teaching other people is to know that they're going to take it further. And these ladies found that of most importance, because they said that they learned a lot, but now they can go and do things by themselves, and they can go teach their daughters or their sisters or their friends and enrich their own lives, because that's why we do community engagement, is to spread and reach beyond. And obviously, we want to spread the word. So we have the students and we have Mapula, and they're communicating, but how do we reach beyond just the students and the external entity? We want to do it through publications. So we use the faculty as well as the university publications. First publication was the NAS faculty publication in 2019, which used the Square to UP issue as well, issue 1. And they talked about how Mapula embroideries and sustainability collided and worked together. And then the second one was the university's social responsibility, both in the week and the publication. Here it was, again, sewing for success, working together, enriching each other's lives. Then we had the 2022 launch of the University of Pretoria's research magazine. And here we had a launch take place at Eat at UP. Now, these weren't student-made products. These were products that were made by the Mapula embroidery ladies. We were showcasing what they can do, their aprons, their table runners, and so forth. And then lastly, there was the UP Cycled Food event that was held most recently by the Consumer Science, Food Retail and Hospitality Management groups, where the lecturers showcased the work of the students as well as the work of the different entities within the department, so food together with clothing and hospitality. And these are just some examples of that.
See, we're running out of time, but this is my last slide. Our plans going forward is, I think, to just continuously build on it. It was mentioned before that it's so difficult to measure what we have done and what impact we have made exactly. And I think that will be the goal from this year onwards, is to really quantify and make concrete conclusions on what we've done and what we still need to do. It's an ongoing process. We haven't finished yet. We're just getting started. I really want to create an environment where we take the students to Winterveld, but that we bring the ladies into the department so that they see the final products. They've only seen the embroidery piece. I want them to see the final collection, and I want them to do a reflective chat with the students regarding what worked well, what didn't work well, and how they found this experience working with someone else. We also have a new lady at Mapula Embroideries. She is the art curator for Sasol, and she has an art gallery she manages in Sandton, and she's actually said that she wants the winning collection at the end of the day to be displayed in the art gallery to promote this collaboration that they have with the University of Pretoria and Mapula Embroideries. And then potential outputs, really putting it out there, not only for us and for the university, but also to have something that the ladies can say, listen here, these are the fabrics we explored, the threads we explored, and this is what is best in terms of going forward with new products. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. We started a little late with the session. So I'm going to take the liberty, because we've ended just 1 minute beyond the original scheduled time, take the liberty of taking a couple of minutes just to take any comments or questions. But before I do that, I just want to thank Dylan for being with us. Apologies that I didn't introduce you. I didn't have your name in the program, but we're very delighted that you were able to be here with us. And everybody, could you please give another round of applause to all of our presenters? Okay, thank you. So we have a first question here with Professor Chitiga Mabugu.
Thank you very much for the fascinating examples that you shared. My question is to Dylan, so making up for you not being introduced earlier. Dylan, I want to commend you and, of course, Professor, for the work that you have done. When you were talking, I heard you talking about how you helped the teachers and how you changed their perspective, how you assisted them. I was wondering, as a student, how did these teachers, through this process, help you and your colleagues? Thank you.
Should I answer now?
Other questions, or can we, let's respond to that one, and then we'll come to Dr. Maremi.
Should I reply?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you for the question. I think the experience was rather, in the beginning, a little bit scary to go out there and see just how much teachers go through that goes undocumented. And for us as trainee psychologists, this was rather a very important aspect in our training, to see how we can actually help people who are going through situations that we cannot control. Often we see clients that are going through situations that we can actually have a hand in changing. However, helping someone who's going through something that's beyond your control as a psychologist is rather a very important aspect in our training. So it was a very crucial aspect, because then we learned that as training psychologists, we can't always control everything we can't always control everything that a person has or is going through. However, we can control what we are trained for. And I think we came in with this whole narrative that, we want to really try our best to help someone get out of something that they're going through. However, to try and help someone who's still working in a very stressful environment and to try and help them cope with that situation was rather very important. So it really assisted us in learning that sometimes we are going to have to help people who are still stuck in a specific situation and help them cope. It's not always about helping them change the situation, but it's sometimes we can help someone cope. So yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Prof. Mine, you'll pardon me, I always talk about indigenous ways of doing things. My question, I know that one day the indigenous psychology will question the universality of psychology itself in terms of the way we do things. How do the students, as you have indicated that sometimes the students discuss among themselves, do they discuss about indigenous methods of psychology of some sort? Thank you.
It depends on what you define as indigenous methods. I do not think that the psychology as we learn it and indigenous methods change is so much different.
yesterday you said the most important thing is Ubuntu. And I thought, yes, that is what we do. That is what we do. We live with people, we try and understand what they do and see their own experiences and see where they can find the solution in their own lives. In the sessions that I have attended on more indigenous healing we have certain names for things. But the way they approach experiences of people, then I said, that is Gestalt therapy that they're doing. And another way, they're actually doing family therapy. That is what they do. So in a way, it's not so much different. As people, we have certain issues, and there's certain ways that we can approach things. And it's always helping the person to develop a solution in the situation where they are.
Good, thank you.
Does that answer anything?
You're answered. Thank you. Okay, colleagues, unfortunately we have to round this up now. Again, a huge thank you to all of our presenters. I think that we've all learned a lot, particularly about the importance of listening and the fact that this is not just teaching, it's learning. And it's a reciprocal experience. So thank you very much for sharing. These are very diverse projects that we've discussed today. So thank you very much. Last round of applause for these speakers. Thank you.
Right, good afternoon, colleagues. And let me add my thanks to those of the registrar by saying thank you so much to our 3 previous speakers and our 4 presenters on case studies for sharing their wonderful stories with us. I was sitting there reflecting also on a comment that Professor Everson had made, and I have to agree with her. I sort of felt a breath of fresh air, if I may describe it. We're in the busiest time of the university schedule, and here we have taken out space to just reflect on what it is that we are doing in our core business, which is teaching and learning, research, and community engagement. And I must share with you one of the highlights for me for these past 2 days has been the fact that you've been here in person. It is just so much different if you can see your colleagues' faces and you can actually talk to them, not via a screen. And yes, I am a baby boomer, so I'm not so technologically orientated. But I think for this year, it's made a huge difference. And I have to share the feeling, it felt for me for the first time as if I stepped outside of the shadow cast by COVID-14. We're back to normal. And what we are talking about here is what the reason is, the raison d'être, the reason why we are here, and that is to change lives. I think one of our presenters talked about touch points, and I think throughout this conference we've had many touch points. So, we are now coming to session 3, and here is where you've listened to the speakers, you've listened to the presenters telling their stories and the case studies, and now the job is going across to you. We would like you to reflect in 4 sessions about the conference, the discussions we've had today, the discussions and discourse of yesterday. And on the screen, you will see that you're going to be divided into 4 groups. Group 1 is the facilitators, Professor Tiaan de Jager. Group 2, Professor Derek de Jong. Group 3, Professor Winnie Naidoo. And Group 4, Professor Chika Sehule. You can see there where you have been allocated to, and I've been told that it's been done in a purely random manner. And then you will see on your program that each one of the groups have a number of questions that you need to address for us. You have 25 minutes in which to discuss these questions, and then we will reconvene here when you will then have an opportunity to provide feedback. Usually it is the rapporteur that will give feedback, and that will be another 25 minutes, and then colleagues, after that, we will do the wrap-up, which the interim Vice-Chancellor will handle. So could I, at this point in time, ask everyone to go to the venues where you have been allocated to? Please put it back again. Yes, there we are. And if that's 25 minutes, so if we could reconvene here by about 22, is it 22:12? Is that right? Have I got the right time? Yes. So if we could reconvene at 22:12 for the feedback sessions. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, afternoon everybody, and my name is Derek. I'm the facilitator for this afternoon. So basically, on the program you will have seen that the theme for this afternoon's group session is transformative pedagogies and practices. So I've got, Alto is going to be the rapporteur giving feedback. So there's basically 4 areas that we need to quickly discuss, with the emphasis on quickly. The first one is teaching and learning of indigenous knowledge systems, new approaches that include grappling with the complexities of indigeneity. That's right, sorry for that. Then secondly, fostering a change in the ways in the way we relate and build knowledge with others instead of about others. Third one is drawing from best practices on the continent and in the global south. And the fourth one is what kinds of research and teaching produce the kinds of leaders who are capable of transforming shattered communities. So basically, what we're saying is the first one is about teaching and learning, indigenous systems, what are new systems, and how to deal with those complexities. That's the first one, using indigenous systems. Second one, how we relate to others in building knowledge. In other words, not about others, but with others. Third one, examples in Africa and in the global south. And then the fourth one is teaching and learning and research in producing leaders that change societies. We need to be back, I think, at 11:50. No, 11:40. Is that right? I think it's 11:40 that we need to be back. So let's spend 5 minutes on each of these 4 basic areas. So the first one is not necessarily a question, it's more a conversation that we need to have about the teaching of indigenous systems. In other words, are there new ones, are there existing ones, and how to deal with complexities. Anybody would like to make a comment? And that's not necessarily always about how we did in the past, but how we can actually do it in the future. Just raise your hand, please. Yes, Alto. I'm going to give it to you.
I think one key thing is that we should incorporate indigenous voices, methodologies and epistemologies into our curriculum, as well as fostering respect for indigenous ways of knowing.
So include that in our processes, in our teaching and learning processes, specifically or deliberately. Okay? What else? Yes. Liesel?
Thanks. I want to build on what Alta says, and then together with that, have a dialogic approach in lectures. Have small group discussions where students dialogue with each other as to how they make sense of that and what they bring into a conversation, and if they're familiar with Indigenous knowledge systems, and it's kind of so build the wanting to know climate.
But are we, so it's going to be a challenge to make sure that we do have within those settings a variety of people coming from a variety of indigenous backgrounds. Am I right? So that's not always possible. So how do we deal with situations where we don't have that luxury of people from indigenous backgrounds to actually contribute to that conversation?
So I agree with you, but I also think us coming from such a diverse society, by and large, many of the classes will have diversity.
Sure.
And from that diversity, you bring a heritage of knowledge.
Sure.
And maybe part of it, and building on the idea of ALTA, is to engage with the fact that there are different bodies of knowledge and speaking about that. And then if you have the privilege in a classroom of also having people with Indigenous knowledge to be open to learn and to include that intentionally in the pedagogy.
But it also places the burden on, or the opportunity rather, on the lecturer to actually bring that knowledge into the system. So it would require additional effort if you can't necessarily always find that within the class setting. So it's a different way of looking at how you bring knowledge into and the lecturer plays a crucial role in that, because it's not always that kind of luxury. Yes?
Thanks, Derek. I've got 3 quick comments. The first one is around, I know I have this bias as a natural scientist that when I think about Indigenous knowledge, I think about this is herbs and natural medicines. But the reality of the matter is that just like all other bodies of knowledge, is that Indigenous knowledge is also dynamic and changing and absorbs what happens around them. So it's not that we're dealing with ancient knowledge. We're dealing with people that are practicing in different environments that so I think it's easier to bring those sorts of knowledge systems, Indigenous or transformed or indigenous, changing as it goes along, into our practice. So that's the first point. Second point is, I think when we think about the sort of situations you've just described, there's actually 2 elements to the training here. The skills we need a mechanism to get our lecturing staff on top of it, and then there's a student component. And sometimes it's the same event and the same process, but it's not always the case. And I forgot my third point, but I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Baron, do we have enough material that speaks to Indigenous knowledge that we can use in classes? Because often we kind of, by default, go back to the existing material and not necessarily look for these kinds. So is there enough material in the class setup to actually use, not only from the experiences, but real hardcore material? Yeah, sure. Sure. Yeah. 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 Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Thanks
Derek,
a lot.
sorry at the mic.
Yes.
I'm just curious, is this idea of Indigenous knowledge, is it a useful idea? Because it presents, as Baron says, something that is locked in. Does it not evolve?
Yeah.
And when it evolves, what does it become?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because Indigenous knowledge, like all other knowledges, are adaptive. They evolve. So what do they become after they have evolved? Do they still remain Indigenous knowledge? Thank you.
Good question. Yeah, so it's not a means to an end, it's almost like an end in itself that we continue. Sure, absolutely. Thank you. Alta, are you still capturing that? I'm just making sure that, Alta, are you still on top of capturing that? Fast. So, in other words, what Gerald was saying is that Indigenous knowledge basically, as it evolves, it doesn't become indigenous anymore. Why am I so battling to pronounce this word? So it doesn't really become, it's evolving. And is it then indigenous or just simple new knowledge that we create? Right.
Can I say something here?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think for us to bring in Indigenous knowledge in our pedagogies, the first thing I think is very important is for us to do a kind of curriculum mapping. where you identify the knowledge, the indigenous knowledge that are relevant or relevant to what you are teaching. Then you bring it into the curriculum. And secondly, I think we need to get the people involved, the owners of the knowledge, the custodians. For example, one of the things we do is fermentation, maybe in chemistry and some of the sciences. And we know people who are doing this local beer is a kind of fermentation. So if you want to teach that, first of all, need to identify that the fermentation is part of the curriculum. You need to teach in that class. And then you want to bring in the indigenous aspect of it, where you bring in the people from those indigenous communities to come and teach that. I think that's the way we can go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chris now? And then we'll move over to the next question.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that we need to take in mind when we are trying to bring in indigenous knowledge practices. And the first of that is sort of the difference between indigenous knowledge and what it is indigenous to, and things that goes within that is this an indigenous or is it an ancient practice? I'm thinking of the midwives yesterday. Which you'll find similar midwife practices all over the world. That's a knowledge that has been suppressed by patriarchy, if you want to call it that way, and science and all of that. And that comes with a worldview. And I think that becomes the interesting thing is about understanding that there are different worldviews and how these different worldviews can contribute to our understanding and enrich our understanding of the world. That it's not necessarily located in a particular culture, but it is a way of seeing the world that has grown. The other is then the notion of traditional cultural practices. And I think there is, first of all, there's interesting room for debate around cultural practices. I'm thinking, again, in gender terms, how there's conflicts between modern understandings and cultural practices. And that needs to be handled with sensitivity. And that becomes a conversation between the people in the class who comes from different cultural perspectives. But then there's also the cultural practices that are sacred. And I think that's one of the other things. I teach a class on sustainability, and I do an introductory class for first years on sustainability practices. And part of it is to bring in these multiple perspectives and how it relates to our understanding and use of space. And part of that is ritual. But there's only so much that I can bring, or that the indigenous knowledge practitioners that I've been speaking to are prepared to bring in, because a lot of it is actually seen as sacred and has to be hidden. So there's that sensitivity as well that we need to keep in mind. This is how much do we lay open and how much do we respect the notions around privacy and what is sacred and what should be kept to the people who are being initiated in that knowledge.
I think the first step always in cases like this, specifically if you work with first years, is to create that sensitivity for cultural complexity. Because, I mean, culture influences worldview. So if you can at least get, or partly, I mean, it's influenced by many other things, but it's an important part of a first year lecture to at least bring in that sensitivity for cultural complexities and then to move from there. And so, yeah, no, thank you for that. I'm going to move over to the next part of the conversation, and this is basically in building knowledge, and that's basically what we do at a university. How do we ensure that we relate to others, in other words, more with others than about others? So in our relationships with the project, the academic project of building knowledge and new knowledge, how do we relate with others and not about others? How do we deal with that? Because we all build knowledge. I mean, that's what the academic project is about. So how do we make sure that we relate in building knowledge with others, in other words, in a collective manner, and not about others? And there's a very specific difference between the two, with others and about others. Yes, Liesel?
Is Leilani not here? She's maybe in one of the other breakout groups, but in engineering, they have a emotions in engineering network, and it's an international network with the idea that the socio-emotional competences also matter in any training. And it's maybe that idea of then looking at humanity, not only at factual, technical aspects of development and how to bring that into the classroom. So I don't have the answer for that, but how do we include socio-emotional competence in pedagogy?
Sure. I think it's what Priscilla was talking about in her presentation was the whole person. In other words, to what extent do we bring the whole person into the process of developing new knowledge? Because we have this cultural complexities, differences, etc., and how do we deal with that in developing new knowledge? So, but it's also through our research activities, I guess, because often research is something that you do with others or about others. Not with others, but about others, not necessarily always with others. And that's where I think the mentorship thing comes in your processes, whereby you become the mentor, but you also become the mentee at some point in terms of building knowledge. So we always see education as a one-directional process and actually multi-directional. Baron?
So I'm going to be a little provocative, and what I'm suggesting puts me also out of my own comfort zone. Imagine we had the levels of trilingualism, only 10% of the bilingualism we have in this room, right? Say that again. Imagine 10% of the conversation here happened in Sepedi. Instead of English and English, because that's what we all understand, but let's say 10 or 20% could do that in Sepedi, and I'm talking about non-native speakers. I really think one of the best ways to get transformative change is to speak each other's languages. And I had grade 12 Sepedi, but it's too fuzzy. But in support, I get the ball rolling. Rikla dira petogo gere bolela, polelo yamongwe yomongwe. Right, Google Translate.
GPT.
Full disclosure, but it says we will make change when we speak each other's language. There's the challenge.
But I also think, to the point that was made yesterday about Ubuntu, which I think loosely translated is we are because of others, or I am because of others. So it suddenly also talks about that collective perspective, even in developing new knowledge. So I think often, as you say, and language is a big barrier or it's a big enabler. And I think, so I fully agree with you. That's a stumbling block that I think we should really focus on. I'm looking at this part of the room. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Prof. And I'm following up on what you've just said about Ubuntu. I think we have to look at the philosophy of Ubuntu and those characteristics that we should have to follow that philosophy of Ubuntu, because that will guide us as to how we should respect these communities and how we should be when we enter these communities. We do not know, but rather the knowledge holders are the ones who know. And to access that, we have to respect and ask for entry into their areas.
Thank you. I'm going to throw a bit of a spanner in the wheels here again and also follow what Baron has done and being a bit controversial. Let's talk for a second about power. And the fact that in academia and the academic project is about, to a large extent, about power. We use our role, which is a very powerful role as academics, to generate knowledge. So power is something that is always, well, in most cases within the academic project, I would like to argue, quite skewed. So for us to actually relinquish the power, in other words, the fact that we think that we are the only ones that can create knowledge or develop knowledge, by relinquishing that power and basically giving the power away to others in order of developing that new knowledge. In other words, suddenly it becomes a collective process of generating knowledge, which could take our power away and obviously reduce our impact as academics, or potential impact as academics. How do you feel about the role of power in knowledge creation? Yes. Is there anybody that want to say something about power, just quickly? Liesel, yes. Oh, can I ask Flavia? Liesel? Flavia?
The generation of knowledge in and of itself, Derek, it requires you to be humble because through that humility you have an openness. And so in essence, I think maybe it's less so about the power that we have or that we think we have, but it's an opening up that space to gain that power through co-creation with others. And so in essence, if you don't allow those who you think don't have power in, The reality is that you have a very myopic view and you will always be shown up for your myopicness.
Thanks, Flavia. It's how do we renegotiate learning outcomes and how do we co-create knowledge? Renegotiate learning outcomes and co-create knowledge. So the next question is about best practices in Africa or in the Global South. Is there anybody that can share with us such examples? Obviously, we had the examples yesterday from the film Fruitvrouw and also about indigenous medicine. Are there any other pertinent examples that you can know of where indigenous knowledge has found its way into curriculum design within your particular area of expertise or anywhere else? Yes, Krishna.
There's quite a lot being done in the fields of architecture and planning.
Mm-hmm.
At WITS, there's Dr. Shishaba Mape, who's done quite a lot in integrating specifically the traditional practices and the use of ritual spaces and linking that into a digital environment and managing it through that ways. And then the new head of Department of Architecture at the Durban University of Technology has also been working on the relationship between indigenous cultures and the use of space, and setting up a research project around that and bringing it into the curriculum at DUT. So there is stuff happening in certain spaces.
Great, thank you very much. It's interesting, at some point, many years ago, I was involved in a little bit of work within the university on institutional culture. And what was mentioned at the time by students is the whole matter of spatial agency. In other words, to what extent students felt that they had agency within the spaces of the University of Pretoria, were they able to identify with the artifacts that we have on campus? In other words, that they feel agency within that. So, I mean, it's quite interesting if you look at local understandings that are influenced by the political history of South Africa and how students can experience agency within the spaces they have on campus, which is quite an interesting understanding and a view of looking at design, spatial agency, etc., etc. So, yeah, I found that quite interesting. Is there anybody else? Yes.
So there's a wonderful example from Ghana, Cape Coast University. They did amazing place-based methodology work for their maths and science education. That's really interesting. There's work by that a group of us did with the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, where we looked at care and support or well-being practices for children and elders in sub-Saharan Africa. And there was a group, a transdisciplinary group with WITS, us, and Northwest University and a couple of collaborators from abroad, trying to understand the adaptive processes from different disciplinary lenses, given the challenges in rural spaces. So I think there are a couple of good practices.
Yeah, Derek, I just wanted to add that some of the, we're talking about these good practices. Sometimes it's about the softer skill. If I look, in the medical faculty, one of the things we are big at is bedside manner. And I will tell a very quick story. A colleague went with students to one of our, community engagement areas, and then she had a sprain, and the only person she could go to is a person in the community who was a traditional healer. And she went there, and then, they, worked on her and that, and she walked out, walking properly. And she said to me, Flavia, my natural instinct as a doctor, especially as an orthopedic surgeon, was to ask, how did you do that? But I realized in that moment how disrespectful it would be. So I left her with her knowledge. And then in that humility understood that in a way, there are some spaces where I may not understand, but in and of itself, it does not remove the fact that healing did happen.
Thank you very much, Flavia. That was quite powerful. So we've got about, I think, a couple of minutes left for the last question. Can I just double check? What time do we need to be done? 2 minutes. All right. So I think probably we'll be able to run another 2 minutes. So the last, I think, question is quite pertinent around how do we, through our teaching, learning, and our research, develop the kind of leaders in society that will make an impact that Professor Brink spoke about yesterday. So the touchpoint principle that I think Priscilla also mentioned. In other words, let me just state that again. How do we, through our teaching and learning, but also through our research, develop leaders that can make a difference in society?
We need to stress ethical behavior.
Right, ethical behavior, definitely. Priscilla?
I think keep in mind adult learning theories and how adults learn. Adult learning theories and how adults learn, and underpin that with some form of learning theory, like transformative learning theory. Or I think those are essential.
So transforming the individual. So the issue that I usually have is that within a university like this, we train doctors, lawyers, engineers, etc., etc. What do we need? And that's a basic assumption. Once you graduate, you will know what to do. If you're a doctor or an architect or an engineer, technically you'll be fine. But what do we need to do to basically get you realize that you are more than just an attorney? You are more than just a doctor in society. How do we get you to that point, or the student to that point, that they realize once they graduate, they're not only a doctor, but they're a doctor that really cares about society, or an accountant that really cares about society? What do we need to do to get to that point?
We need to become it. We can't teach what we are not. And so, in essence, if I, as a doctor, want my students to be socially conscious, I need to be in organizations and societies and then have them tag along. So we cannot teach what we are not.
I mean, that puts a major responsibility on the shoulders of us as teachers and lecturers. I'm not talking about research right now. Let's just focus on that part. Because suddenly, your role is more than just, getting the student to have a certain basic understanding of technical knowledge, etc., etc. But you represent something else as a lecturer. It places a major responsibility on the shoulders of us as lecturers. What else? It's okay.
Thank you. In our department, we practically implement this by allowing every lecturer to include a slide right at the beginning of the course, which basically talk about being ethical, being good leaders, making a difference in the world, and that's how we practically do it.
Is this something that should start right at the first year level, when that first year student arrives on your doorstep? Okay.
Thank you. I think in addition to what he said, a kind of civic education, is something that we have to continually do to teach people how to be human beings in the society, whether as a lecturer, as a student, or whatever. If we continually do that, I think it will sink into the minds of the people. Thank you.
So it's not something only to first years, it needs to run through. Yes, sir.
Sorry, dear, I see we've run out of time. I was going to suggest Paulo Freire's idea of conscientization. Where students work with community, they understand the challenges that confront communities, they are part of co-creating solutions that address some of those challenges, some of the things that Prof. Kibugi talked about in his presentation earlier. Thank you. So that we do away with this ivory tower mentality. Thank you.
I think the groups are coming in. Is there anybody that would like to say anything about the way we should do research to actually make a difference in society? That the research is not only part of our academic project that is part of the ivory towers, but it's real type of
Derek.
research that...
Derek, just in terms of the research, I think we love research, we're always asking questions, but communities and people are getting tired of just being our little guinea, we're just drawing information from them. They actually need to see us incorporating their feedback into our practices, and I think that's important.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Liesel?
Thank you. Derek, I think that there are so many examples in our university also of people doing this. I'm reminded of Ronelle Ferreira, who's at Faculty of Education, who engages in emancipatory and participatory research. And she invites co-generators of knowledge to present and co-author with her. And she helps to attract funding for them to also participate in overseas conferences. So I think if that idea of democratizing research is front and center in your research endeavor, then the rest follows.
I also think it's a question of power. If you relinquish power, in other words, if you disseminate that responsibility amongst people that might not necessarily always be part of the so-called academic project, you might learn a lot from them. And I think to co-create that kind of research would be quite meaningful in society than sitting in your office and thinking the research you do is going to make a difference in society. I don't think, it's not a question either or, but I think it's something that we need to bear in mind. Right, I think we probably have to stop. Thank you very much for your contribution. It's quite a quick one. One could have stayed on for the rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Are the members of Group 4 back? If somebody who's been in Group 4, you are all back? Ah, yes, Chika, I was waiting for you. Right, thank you very much. Colleagues, so I hope you had very good deliberations and we're looking forward to the feedback. Let me just say, there's an important QR code above my head. I would like you to please download that and fill in the survey. It is an anonymous survey of the 2 days that we have spent and is extremely important feedback for Professor Ferris and for the team in preparing for next year's Senate conference, which the interim Vice-Chancellor has already indicated is going to be focused on research. So I presume that Professor Maharaj, you're going to start planning tomorrow. So, but please do fill that in. Right, colleagues, feedback. I'm going to ask each group to stay quite close to the time that we don't overrun. So we're starting with Group 1. And the rapporteur is Professor Louise Whittaker. Louise, you have 5 minutes. When I do this, you see your time is up. I'll sit over there.
Thanks very much, Prof. Koornoff. I should have set a timer, but anyway. So I am reporting on Group 1, which was facilitated by Prof. De Jager. And I have to say that we got off to a slightly slow start. I suspect just because there's been so much information coming at us in 2 days that we're all a little bit shell-shocked. But we then got going with a very generative and detailed conversation. I did try and take some notes, and those are them. So I'm going to try and talk to those a little bit. You'll see how neat it is at the beginning. That's because I had lots of time, because we were a bit slow. And then by the end, which is on the left-hand side, I'm scrambling to get it all down. So there was an awful lot of conversation. And I think there's a lot of value to be gained out of speaking further on these issues, because people really do have a lot of valuable contributions to make. Our first question was, how can we incorporate transformative pedagogies and practices in curricular community engagement? And we had a conversation here about what do we mean for transformative. We came to the conclusion that transformative necessarily is for both students and for the community, and this was posed as something of a double act, as it were. And in order to be effective in this double act of truly transforming both the students and their modes of learning, as well as the extent to which they understand the context in which they're going to have to work when they complete their degrees, we need to be conscious about our intent, our design, and our practices. So intent really has to be about partnership and empowerment. And this was a theme that came throughout our conversation, that if we're not in genuine partnership with communities, with an aim to empowering them, then we're just hopping in and out and doing minor things and not really making a difference to anybody, either the students or the communities. So what this means is that from a design point of view, we really have to be engaged in and help our students engage in participatory learning. And what that means is that we have to understand the problems from the perspective of the community. It's not helpful for us to decide what problems a community has. We ought to be speaking to the communities themselves to understand the nature of their problems. And then, having done that, we can ask students even to design their own learning, potentially, but certainly whatever mode of learning they go into, to engage, expect them to engage in practices of reflection and thinking deeply about what it is that they do in these communities and the effect that it has both on the communities and themselves, as well as encouraging them to ask for feedback on the work that they're doing there. So this question of engaging the communities and not sort of parachuting in, painting a wall and leaving, which was an example that was given, really also speaks to our second point and our second question, which is about ensuring continuity and sustainability. Because if we don't have community involvement, how do we develop sustainability? And we discussed that without a genuine integration, both into the communities but also into the institution, we have this ad hoc approach. So the integration needs to include an integration to our curriculum, to our faculty development, to our resource allocation, and to our strategy. In other words, we're pushing for a really much more holistic approach across the university so that we don't have ad hoc projects going on. I'll come to evaluation and celebration in a minute, but really this continuity and sustainability question linked very directly to the third question that we had, which is how do we use curricular community engagement to address the polycrisis? Because in addressing a polycrisis, we have to understand that it's not just a whole lot of different crises all coming at the same time, but it's crises that are themselves interrelated, and if we are going to help our students address interrelated systemic crises, we ourselves need an interrelated and systemic approach. So what we really need in order to be able to do this is to have an institutional response that is strategic from the point of view of the university, but that on an ongoing basis starts with communities and that develops a common language and understanding inside the university of what it is that we're trying to do, as well as with communities of the problems that we can help them solve. And in this way, we can collaborate not only with our students and not only with communities, but also across disciplines. So overall, what we want is to be holistic, to be able to prioritize what it is that we're doing at an institutional level, and do all of that in order to help communities build resilience in response to the problems that they face. At the end of all of that, if we don't evaluate and celebrate, how do we know what it is that we're doing, and how do we promote it in the future? So evaluation, monitoring and evaluation, which always sounds terribly dry and boring, was put together with this idea of celebration, which sounds way less unexciting. It actually sounds rather nice. I think we've seen some wonderful examples of that this morning, and they really are very inspiring. It was a very complex and detailed conversation. I've captured a fraction of it here, and I invite my colleagues from the group to add to what I have to say, if they wish. Any further feedback from the group?
I think they said you did a good job.
They're not smiling. I need it. Ah, that's better. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Right, thank you. Thank you for that, Louise. The second group, rapporteur is Professor Alta van der Merwe. Alta?
Oh, there it is. Okay, so, yeah, you guys want me here, and I have to read there. So we looked at indigenous knowledge. Where is Karen? Okay, Karen needs to stand next to you. Need to add where I get confused. So the first thing is about teaching and learning of indigenous knowledge systems in our classroom environment, and how are we going to include this, the complexity of indigenous systems and so on. So here it's very important that you listen to different voices, methodologies and epistemologies and include that in your curricula, as well as fostering respect for Indigenous ways of knowing. There was a feeling that you should have small groups and have these discussions with the students in the classroom setting. Accept also that this is for always changing. And then there was someone that asked, oh, it's just a little bit lower, this ever-changing thing, is it a useful thing then to include it? That was also a voice that we heard. Lecturing staff must be competent to handle this, and there should be always a co-creation idea. I think this comes from the design thinking. I've heard co-creation quite a lot the last 2 days. And it seems that this is something that we really have to look at as an idea. Indigenous partners, be conscious of the difference between Indigenous knowledge or ancient practice and different cultural practices and complexities should be handled with sensitivity. I'll look at my spelling. Okay, anything to add, Karen? Yeah.
To engage people so that you co-create this knowledge and embrace the diversity that you already have in our student composition, because they already bring a lot of that.
Okay, thank you. So then secondly, we had it's about the knowledge where it is about others instead of about, with others instead about others, that different perspectives. Here we had quite a discussion about the fact that you should include the humanity aspect and the social emotional competence and bring it into the classroom. And there was the example from Lelani, she already left about the emotions in engineering. It's not that engineers don't have emotions, but just to speak a little bit to them. Multi-directional relationships between mentor and mentee in the classroom setting, language barriers should be considered. We will make change if we speak one another's language. That was Baron that had a discussion on that. Look at the philosophy of Ubuntu, respect communities, and remember that academics are in a very powerful role, and how can you relinquish the power and give it away and also give power to the student in one way or another. Open spaces and opportunities for co-creation of knowledge, and to what extent do the students feel that they have agency in the UP space. And this is something that Derek said, that the project that they were involved in at the University of Pretoria. Anything to add, Corin? Okay, then we go to the third one, and here we spoke about the Global South. There was a lot of interaction and sharing done by projects in the university. I wasn't quick enough to capture it all. It was architecture, health science, the example from Runel that is doing participatory research. But the big question is, once again, to what extent do the students feel that they have agency in the UP space? Okay, then lastly, what kinds of research and teaching procedure produce the kinds of leaders who are capable of transforming shattered communities? A very big topic that came out in this whole discussion was the ethical behavior, which needs to be emphasized. Transformative adult learning, students need to understand that they are more than a vocation. We can't teach what we are not. You represent more than only a lecturer. Create awareness on ethical behavior and becoming leaders in our lectures. Start class with a slide on relevant ideas, and that came from computer science, where they include that in the beginning of their lectures. They have some discussion around ethical behavior and stuff, and so on. Co-create solutions with society and students. Get rid of ivory towers, and research should be relevant and show impact. And I think impact is also a topic that we had yesterday and had a discussion. Corin, anything to add?
Not really. I think maybe just what Prof. Flavia said, that, you know, as lecturers, we should set the examples. That point that you made, that we can't teach what we're not, and that we should also be involved in communities and in organizations and so forth.
Okay, thank you. Derek, anything that you want to, you're fine. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much. Group 3, I think, is Professor Zita Mokomani and Professor O'Connell, if you want to come and stand here as well. Can I just ask colleagues that you all speak through the microphone because we are busy taping it, and if you make comments not through a microphone, then we might miss very valuable comments. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, colleagues. I don't have slides, I just have my notes here. I was in the group 3 was talking about professional responsibilities and indemnities in community engagement. Our facilitator was Professor Vinny Naidu. It was a very robust engagement, and if there's one feedback I can say, maybe next year we should have an hour instead of 25 minutes. And I haven't captured all, and I'm sure my group mates will contribute where I have left. We thought this was a very important questions. We had 6 questions, and we thought that were very important because they define what we really do. And we didn't answer them in this order because they're all interlinked. But the first one was how do we rethink our understanding of community? And there we said, in the context of community engagement at the university, community is not necessarily geographic, and it's not necessarily external, because we are even, I'm in the Faculty of Humanities in the Department of Sociology. I'm part of the community of the faculty, part of the community of the university, so it's not necessarily always external, it can be internal. And one thing which I think was very important was that it's also not necessarily disadvantage or inferior, because sometimes when it seems when we talk about community, we go to disadvantaged parts of the community, you can say. So what is it then? We talked about that and said it's probably where we can make a difference or where everyone benefits from the experience that we bring. So based on this observation, we said there's a need to look at the way we define community engagement, because most of the time what we are really referring to is community service, not really community engagement. And a side thought in that, it's just a food for thought that came from the discussion, was sometimes with this community service, are we really just covering for state failure instead of really what the community wants? For example, was given like, if we go and paint a school, is it really our role as a university to go and paint a school? The community does benefit, but is it really our role or the role of the Department of Public Works? For example, if we go and provide water, is it really our role? Just a side thought that came. Then we said, in one of the questions about how do we empower our students, we said that when students leave, they should have been exposed, all of them, all 9 faculties, in a way have been exposed to some form of community engagement, which is mainstreamed in all these modules, and it should not necessarily be assessed, and it should be a continuous process, necessarily be assessed, because it won't make sense to assess the impact of the student, but rather the impact of the university in that. And it should just, like I said, be continuous, even up to the alumni. And in that community engagement, not only communities should benefit, but also students must benefit. Group mates. So I think we just covered it there. I'm happy. Thank you. There's a... Right? Just give a microphone. Okay. Thank
you. Sorry, thank you. I thought an important point was made by one of the participants, and just to emphasize the notion that when we define community, we should think beyond the asymmetric relationships, often reflective of the income and inequality divides in our society, to challenge ourselves to actually go where a historically privileged university would tend not to go. And the example that was made was, why are we not seeing ourselves going into, for example, higher income communities and engaging them around questions of inequality, engaging them about tolerance and other themes that might be relevant. We tend to go into poorer community and do things, even if it's with, but for those demographic groups. So just reconceptualizing the way in which we define community as not being, firstly, just geographically defined, but also reaching beyond that, who we traditionally would actually go and do things for. So that was an important point. I think that Professor Madiri, who made the point, would have done it much more articulately, but I think that's a sense of what we wanted to convey.
Right, thank you very much for that. Group 3, thank you for the input, and over to Professor Rhoda Leask from Vet Sciences. I don't know if your co-alternate rapporteur wants to join you here in front. Rhoda, 5 minutes.
Thank you. So we had quite a robust discussion as well. We only had 2 questions to answer, but I have over 2 pages of information. So I'm going to try to summarize it as best I can, and I hope I don't leave anything out, because at one stage when I was typing, it felt a little like I was playing the piano Rondo alla Turca. It was going so fast I couldn't keep up. And yes, we vets do actually know a little bit more about things other than veterinary science, so we can talk about music and other things. So our topic was understanding and engaging with communities as equal partners. So our first question was, how do we deal with the question of language? And Prof. Sehole emphasized dealing with equality and how language is important in engaging with different communities as equal partners. So language can be a barrier, and we cannot learn all of the languages ourselves, and interpreters can assist in this regard. However, things can be lost in translations. So we need to try to involve people that speak the language if we're going out into these communities, so that we can really get to the gist of what's happening. And it was emphasized that by challenging the language, you're challenging the identity of the person. So you shouldn't expect a person to now communicate in a language that they're unfamiliar with or that isn't their home language. Then qualifications can create arrogance, and we need to humble ourselves in order to engage with the communities so that we too can learn from them. That was one of the highlights. And the importance of follow-up and feedback, that you don't just go out into communities, make a bunch of empty promises, and they never see you again, because that will not build good relations in future. And then while there are differences that we can see and everybody doesn't seem to be equal, our value is equal. So we have equal importance, even though we're different. And then the other question was, how do we depart from an ethnographic gaze when working with images that are taken of communities, and how outsiders might view those communities? So examples were given of where women might be in a skirt and necklace without any tops on. And then we were wondering, well, how do people view those images? Are they viewed as scantily clad women, or do they view the images in the context of what was actually happening at the time? And it is really important to view those images in context. And one of the main issues then was the respect, and how do we give the people that respect? Just go down a bit. As I said, I've got 2 pages of stuff, so I just need to get to the important things. Then another thing was, rather than the researchers going out and dictating to people what we think the communities need, we need to engage more with the communities to find out what they think they need. So that was also important. And then we also, as has been mentioned, I think Sandy said it just now as well, some communities are not aware that their children can actually go and study at a historically white university. They still have that impression that it's not going to cater to their needs. And we really need to get out there and ensure that people have that understanding that it's now inclusive and they can get something out of it. I think that was the main thing there. Janine, I don't know if you have anything that you'd like to add.
I just want to add one or two things on both topics without any order. There were this thing that we need to also train our students not to be referring to the community, those people, these such a things. They need to know also the way we humbling ourselves when we go into the community to learn from them. So they have their way of doing things which we need to actually research before going to those communities so that we can engage with them and respect and understand the way they process the information. So that was very important. And somewhere also it was discussed the role of our ethics committee, who can also alert us with our questionnaires to adapt where it's necessary. And yeah, with the translation, as many people as, and when we're going out, it's not that we're going to have solution. We need to stay away from making false promises because we're not going to change the world. We're going to find solution together with the community. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Rhoda, Janine, for your feedback, Group 4. So, colleagues, let me start off by just saying I think it would be very valuable to Prof. Ferris if the rapporteurs could just forward their documentation through so that we don't lose your good ideas. So please, if you could see to that. So, colleagues, we've heard many stories. We've heard what your thoughts are. And I want to just take a step back and go back to yesterday when Professor Brink spoke about the fact that universities are very good at focusing on what we're good at, but that we still have a way to go to find out what we are good for. And I think the way in which we've shared stories over the past 2 days is showing that we are doing wonderful work in the area of community engagement, curricular community engagement, research community engagement. But I think we are now at the crossroad where we need to institutionalize this. Now, this means that we as an academic community need to agree on a more structured, formalized framework, if you like, within which we are going to in future conduct these kind of community engagement, community service projects. And some of the words that has come to the fore in our discussions are things like baseline. If we don't have a baseline and you've worked for 20 years, you don't know where you've come from. You don't know if there's been improvement, direction, acceleration. What is your objective of the engagement? There was, I think, Louise, you spoke about design thinking. How do we design around this? How do we document the process? How do we talk about the process? How do we measure the progress? How do we analyze that? How do we assess it? How do we give feedback? And then if we start documenting this, how do we institutionalize it, which means how do we put resources behind it, give recognition, look at advancement not only for teaching and learning and research, but a third leg, which is the community engagement. And so I think the next big challenge for us as an academic community is to ask the question, how are we going to make this in a more framework, I don't want to say formal, but in a more structured manner so that we can institutionalize it better and so that we can also share some of the successes that we have in this institution in a much broader manner. I do want to add just a thought that I had as we were going through the discussions in the groups now. If your students involved in community engagements are senior enough, you also now have the opportunity to show them how to structure these programs in a way in which they can demonstrate impact. You can show them how you design it, how you fund it, how you plan it, how you assess it, how you document it, how you analyze it, and how you evaluate impact. So I think there's also a learning opportunity here for some of our more senior students. With that, let me thank all of the teams and for all of your input. And we are now coming, I think, to the close of our conference. And so I have the honor of asking our Vice-Chancellor and Principal to please close the conference. Before I do so, QR code, survey, important, please complete. Professor Musia.
Colleagues, we're drawing to a close of a very exciting time we had, and I'm sure that each one of us had something to take, into our little fiefdoms and see how we can translate that into impact. Chris said the impact can't be in the future, it should be in the past. But anyway, I just, look back at when the Senate conference started, which is a couple of years ago, not many, and the first one we had in the Sanlam Auditorium. And we're all over the place, but because there have a lot of intellectuals in the room, we're able to make it work somewhat. But I see now a much more structured and very impactful engagement, very robust, and I think we'll keep improving this as we go on. And to all the speakers, facilitators, rapporteurs, everyone. And I think this was quite instructive to many of us. The case studies were just apt, and I know that we have many examples on curriculum community engagement at this university. We are just too big to demonstrate all of them. But they were truly exciting, those that were selected here, very diverse and touching on different fields. And this made me reflect a little bit on, our welcoming day last week with SM Wolf, with the professor, the little dog, with flip-flops, and how that will be making an impact into the community as well, But I know you'll have to get money for them to actually collect that data. And the topic, teaching with impact, is truly what, in my view, has been happening here in preparation as we go further. And I had a conversation with Professor Karen Ferris. She's in charge of archives at this university, And that's one thing that we truly pride ourselves, that we document stuff, we keep stuff, you know, we just have to read some of the things, and I know we don't have much time to do that, but just a small demonstration of, you know, these different columns, like the research that was done and who was it and when was it, and as you can see, she just pulled something quickly from 1977. And there's a column there of the impact, because this is work in progress. I'm sure it can be filled as we go on. She asked her to think about it since yesterday, and now pull the records, but I'm sure we can be able to use this so that we can start documenting it fully. Remember, that was the key word as well, that we need to do that. So our learnings were truly, you know, inspiring. Case studies on the IKS, you know, the student learning experiences, they continue to inspire us, that, you know, as the University of Pretoria, we continue to set ourselves apart from the rest, and we see it by what our students can do, and that makes me truly proud, as in case Professor Sinkobuge, as Vice Principal for Student Life, that, you know, I'm still very proud, but I know you're prouder than I am with what our students can do. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a very long time for us to be here, and I know we stayed away from other work because we're committed. And I would like to thank Professor Ferris and her team, Professor Stein and others who put this whole thing for us together and communicated very regularly for us not to forget that we have a Senate conference with a very important topic. And I know that we will be able to continue to get this work going, teaching with impact, and engaging our communities to transform our world. Everyone else, you know, the executive, the deans, all Senate members, students, this is a very busy time for students, and I wish to ask Senate to thank the 2 student representatives who has been with us without fail. You know, they're neatly dressed in SRC leadership outfit, Ms. Van der Waalt and Pepo. They must see you don't mind. They probably think it's just junior lecturers. That's our TSC members. In spite of all the big challenges we have with students and registration and NSFAS and all of these, thank you very much for making time to be with the Senate. I'm informed that you said you were hungry, so I don't want to stand in your way of hungry senators and myself. But on behalf of, Senate, thank you very much for your commitment. Those who couldn't be with us have lost, but we know that we have this recorded. We know that they work in some of your departments. Let us share the information readily, because we work in a team, and that's the UP way. Thank you very much.